To the October 5th special board voting meeting. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Fike, if we could please have the roll call.
Allison Wilson,
Here.
Hunter Ahrens, John Fiddler,
Here.
Dr. Ann Herring,
Here.
Dr. David Hemberger,
Here.
Michael Chapina, Anthony Chowdhury,
Here.
Marie Miller,
He should be here shortly.
Michelle Stratton,
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Fike. In addition to the 9 board members in attendance this evening, we are also joined at the board table by our solicitor, Sharon Montaigne, and members of the school district administration, including Dr. Kimberly Miner, superintendent, Dr. Flam, director of teaching and learning, Mrs. Harris, director of pupil services, Dr. Haller, director of human resources, and Mr. Fike, who serves as our director of finance and support services, as well as our board secretary. We will now be following board policy number 903 regarding public participation in board meetings for our public comment. I will not be reading this policy this evening. Please be aware that if you do not comply with our policy, we will unfortunately have to ask you to leave. Okay, Mr. Gardella.
Good evening. Last meeting at public comment, I reflected on the legacy this board will leave behind. I'm so pleased that you noted the lack of discussion of the comprehensive plan that I identified and intend to spend some time reviewing this document tonight. Because this plan is different from the one that was provided by email on August 19th, there's been no opportunity for public input. I've collected several reference articles on one of the strategies identified at the elementary level using very simple Google searches, and I'm happy to provide you with the resources or provide the links to the articles. So since at the last meeting I identified deficiencies in your performance as a board, tonight I will offer some solution-based suggestions and resources. What would a disciplined, trained, and informed board do as they review a comprehensive plan that is supposed to remediate extremely poor academic performance in a district that spends over $21,000 per student per year? Such a board would ask for evidence of efficacy of the strategies proposed for remediation. Evidence of efficacy is not accepting anecdotal data with an N size of 1. Simply saying that this worked at my previous school is not providing evidence of efficacy. A disciplined, trained, and informed board would ask not only for information that supports the strategy, but would also ask for contrarian data. If you would ask for this with respect to the literacy strategies being proposed, you would find a surfeit of recent studies and articles that argue against using Orton-Gillingham-based programs like Wilson Foundations and level literacy programs like Fountas and Pinnell. In fact, you would find many authors who point to the status of these programs as cash cows for authors and publishers with no independent scientific research supporting their use. Such a board would not approve purchases for materials supposedly aligned with the strategies outlined in the comprehensive plan before actually approving the comprehensive plan. The literacy wars have been a battleground for many years. When reading first was a focus of the original NCLB Act in the early 2000s, districts I worked in adopted the Michigan Literacy Progress Profile and rigorously trained all teachers on this version of running records. Because those efforts did not produce the desired results, those districts have moved on. Balanced literacy programs have been around for many decades, but there's scant evidence that they work. Paying thousands of dollars for program-branded plastic tubs filled with paperback readers without questioning efficacy before even reviewing the comprehensive plan is not the hallmark of a disciplined, trained, and informed board. Read just one of the articles I'm providing for you, and you'll see over and over that Orton-Gillingham-based programs are labeled with the term insufficient evidence of effectiveness. Regarding the strategies proposed at the middle school and junior high school level, as a mathematics teacher and author who worked on the Connected Mathematics Project and successfully implemented it in school districts, it saddens me to see that the implementation of other innovative curriculum, like investigations in number, data, and space and college prep mathematics, have failed so spectacularly in Exeter. A disciplined, trained, and informed board would ask why otherwise successful programs cannot achieve satisfactory results in Exeter. It also is painful to see that the strategy recommended to remediate this implementation is to point fingers at the performance and alignment of earlier grades as the cause for poor performance in grade 7. The other strategy identified is to again spend more money on a supplemental program. Has no one in Exeter heard of Khan Academy, a free, substantive online resource for mathematics education? Finally, let us turn our attention to the two strategies identified to improve high school outcomes. The first is to offer a new kind of high school credit through a career internship program. How will this integrate with current graduation requirements? What will students be allowed to substitute these credits for? Has anyone even asked what required classes have the highest failure rates in grades 9 and 10? Rather than designing some new type of credit that will potentially allow students to sidestep current graduation requirements, why not work to improve the instruction in the high failure rate courses so that more students earn the required credits? The Check and Connect strategy, with 5 counselors at the high school, which, by the way, gives a caseload right at the level recommended by the American School Counselors Association, and the extra expenditure to fund the SAP and counselors at all the other levels. Why is this not already being done by the guidance staff? Thank you.
Mrs. Gardella.
Hello, my name is Mary Beth Gardella, and I'm here tonight to loop back around to a comment from last month's school board meeting that needs to be addressed. One school board member responded to a public comment. I find this curious since the same school board member in previous years had many conversations with the speaker about school issues at swim and water polo meets. These included budget questions, school issues, special education issues, etc. There's also email communications from this board member requesting advice on similar subjects, and in fact, this board member encouraged the speaker to consider applying for the temporary seat that was open 2 years ago. In addition, the speaker's full resume has been provided to the board, so it was a curious question he asked. But now that it has been asked, it needs to be answered. You see, many school boards are rife with conflicts of interest as the reasons why people run for school board. Some are stay-at-home moms or are retired and are looking for something to do. Some actually care about student achievement and have experience and knowledge to help. Others see the school board as a stepping stone to a bigger public office or are building their candidate resumes. There are teachers on school boards who teach in one district but live in another, and they run for the board in the district where they live. Many school board members have relatives or spouses who are employees either in district or in another district who have ties to the union. It is no secret that the National Teachers Union hold learning sessions on how to run relatives for school boards. Relatives will be sympathizers. See, there was a school employee 12 years ago who was on the board during Ted's superintendency. She violated the contract not just once or twice, but many times. The district had policies for such violations, and those were followed. These multiple violations resulted in a denial of a vacation request that was also in violation of the contract. The principal followed the contract and the school board's policies. It did not sit well and led to a visit by the school board member to Ted, in which Ted was told to make it go away. And not only that, but the principal had to publicly apologize to the school board member's wife who violated the contract. So now it comes down to an ethical question of principles and morals. An ethical dilemma delivered by an unprincipled person. Do you violate board policy and your integrity to make it go away? Or do you follow board policy and stand in your principles knowing full well the weight of that decision? In a perfect world, conflicts would not exist on school boards. The focus would only be on what's best for the kids and the community, and all would work for that goal. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, and we see ethical dilemmas all the time. It's happening right now as people are facing the choice between a coerced vaccination with no exemptions or losing a job. Schools are going to see it in the future In student populations, if parents are forced into vaccine mandates with no exemptions in order for their children to be educated in government schools. These are all ethical and deeply personal choices. So during the last meeting, it was stated in air quotes, yeah, we know what terminated for no cause means. I say yes, sadly we do. We know the cause. You can be terminated for doing your job with fidelity and integrity when conflicts of interest are controlling boards of education. Thank you.
Mr. Kaufman? Sure. Mrs. Dobernecki?
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. So since there was an unforeseen commotion at the September 21st school board meeting, I'd like to revisit some really important points that were raised that you might have missed. Remarks were made by a school board member at the meeting on September 7th that he did not know about poor scores in reading and math because the previous administration did not highlight them. It is very easy to find Pennsylvania school district scores online using a Google search. Serving as a school board member, why would you wait for the administration to tell you about the scores in the district? What will this school board leave behind for the community of Exeter? Many of you will not be on this board after December. What are you leaving this district and this community? You leave behind an out-of-control budget with annual tax increases only justified by your refusal to cut spending. No desire to review the return on any investment, just increase spending. You will make it very hard for any future disciplined school board to reverse your direction, even as residents shoulder the burdens you have placed on us. You leave behind very poor results in reading, math, and graduation rates. You will be leaving behind a highly divided community because you refuse to take the time to engage honestly with the community, including community members without children who still must subsidize your spending. The student achievement results will never change unless the school board questions the curriculum, instruction, and assessment material and methods recommended by this administration and publicly asks for evidence that they will produce results. Discussing the results at one school in the past doesn't provide that evidence. Neither does using marketing materials provided by the company. You will leave behind a complete lack of accountability. You are exhibit number one in any demonstration that we know better than you, so we will do what we want when we want to. You've spent more time over the last few months discussing a LERTA agreement than you have spent publicly discussing your comprehensive plan in board meetings. At the April presentation of this document, the board president asked for a vote to be added to the May voting meeting, and yet reading the board agendas and minutes since then show no vote took place, and finally at the October board meeting you discussed it. But what preparation did you do? The plan is poorly designed with few specifics about what is needed to improve instruction and few plans to communicate to the community. But it is no surprise that you did not want to publicly discuss this plan. There are so many challenges and so few strengths identified. In fact, two of the strengths that were identified in the document are that there are no strengths. It seems like the only strategies available to improve student achievement are to spend, spend, spend. If these data points and this message bothers you, then maybe it's time to do some research and ask some professionals who have a track record how to improve results. You can do better than this, as the community deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Personnel Committee, Mr. Japina.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, wasn't there a person that wanted to go after her? Or did I
I think it
misunderstand
was
what
the
happened?
next session.
It was for the next meeting.
Personnel Committee consent agenda recommended action. It's recommended the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following personnel items: resignations, appointments, leaves of absence.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to thank. I don't want to cry. Courtney Kirshner was my IEP teacher, first grade through I think fourth grade, and she just helped a lot. Put it that. She did a lot, and Mr. McCracken really reinforced my love for history. And I was very blessed to have him as my teacher in fifth grade for social studies. So I just want to thank both of them for their time with the district.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. I believe Jennifer Cook, our new junior high assistant principal, is here. So welcome to you, and we're excited to have you here. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ahrens, Finance, Facilities, and Audit.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the terms of stipulation for combined tax assessment appeal dockets numbers 2020-17726 and 2020-17736 and authorizes the solicitor to execute on behalf of the district.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
So I'm going to read the item first, and then I think we have guests here that can just speak to our guaranteed savings contract that I just wanted to invite up quick. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors award guaranteed energy savings contract between Exeter Township School District and Quandel Energy Solutions for work at the Lausch Administration Building, HVAC $807,512, including associated electrical and fire alarm work, and controls $156,700. Capital budget for HVAC was $800,000, and controls district-wide were $400,000. So Brian, do you want to bring them up quick and introduce them after somebody seconds it?
Second. Mike or Rob? Okay. Is Sheldon in there? Yep. Mike or, wow. Mike or Rob, do you want to just say a couple words on what you did in the last 3 or 4 months since they appointed, or you won the RFP for the energy saving contractor? He's a contractor.
There you go. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Mike and Sheldon with Quandel Energy Solutions. Happy to be here tonight to have this project considered. So we've been working since you approved us for the last couple of months, really looking at this building here for the HVAC improvements primarily are much needed. The systems are about 26 years old, and they were put in when the building was a school. And so really our task was, to as cost effectively as possible, come up with a solution to really, improve that, make it as efficient as possible, but also serve the building as it sits, as administration building, with of course your special areas like this. So we did that. We've gone through the design study and what you're spending, and came up with a solution to bring back to you, which is going to, we hope, simplify the systems, which pretty much will be the majority of the units, which most of us are on the roof. We are actually going to eliminate some of those because they're not necessary and combine them, which will make it less to maintain. We're also improving the control systems. Will give you better control, which will tie into the rest of the district. And there are some other things we did consider, which were alternates were really, that was primarily for the multipurpose space, which we felt, in consultation with Brian, that you didn't necessarily have to do right away because it's lightly used, and there are enough of them that carry it, and maybe something to consider in later years as they fail. So going through this, this will also save the district about $13,000 a year doing the maintenance and the energy, for which we guarantee that. This will also come with this is essentially a single prime contract, so we handle all the management, we'll handle all the commissioning, and it's a fixed price, so there won't be any change orders.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call the question.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, go ahead.
How many, Sarah, how many projects like this have you done? What's your experience level in a project?
Well,
I've
done about 40 of these, and most of those have been schools.
Okay.
So.
And the range in cost from X to Y?
I've done them from 60,000 up to over 20 million.
Okay.
So, with a variety of different types.
I'm not an expert in this kind of work, but it struck me that there's a 1-year warranty that I read in the document.
Correct.
I mean, I just leased a new car. I get a 3-year warranty and I'm not spending $1 million. Why such a short warranty?
That's pretty relatively standard for a construction project. Now this is primarily for us is going to be it's labor and materials for the entire year. The manufacturer's warranties, which a lot along the air conditioning equipment, tend to be longer than that. So you would get more than that for anything like that, but primarily for the entire project, it's essentially a standard year. And that's like I said, that's pretty typical.
So you're saying for pieces of equipment there might be longer?
Yeah. So a lot of the compressors in your air conditioners typically have a longer. I think typically they're about 3 years. Some of them will go to 5, which I can certainly find what those are. But those are relatively, and that's what the majority of this is the the equipment replacements.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess, Brian, for you is, as I read the motion, this is using money that's in the bank?
It's in the budget. We're about 6,000 over on the mechanical, if you call it, and the controls were within the budget. And that 6,000 will be taken care of in the first year savings alone. It's like 13,000 guaranteed of energy costs. One of the things that they didn't mention, these new units won't be belt driven, so we won't have to replace belts. They're a lot easier to maintain. Right now, we're probably replacing belts every 10 to 12 months on the roof. On the units that are working, we think I have 23 up there right now. There's 19, I believe, that work for air conditioning. The heat works on all of them, but the air conditioning is what keeps on failing, and you can't get the compressors or the coils. Special ed this summer, all 3 units went down, and we ended up having to hire a contractor to come out, take the unit apart, take the coils out because they couldn't replace them, and find the pinholes and braze each pinhole and then put it back together. And luckily that worked, that we limped through the summer.
Right.
So.
And what kind of dent does this put in our capital budget?
We have a capital budget about $7.5 million right now. This year we're talking between the bus garage and this about 5.1 million that's in there.
Right. So it doesn't leave much of a cushion for some sort of emergency.
I mean, there's another $1 million that goes in next year when we refund the remainder of the 2017 bonds. When we're refunding them, we're not extending the debt. It's just that the rates drop so much, but they can't be recalled or refunded into that time.
Okay.
So.
All right, so what's your level of confidence that we've got enough to withstand any emergencies with chillers and other HVAC systems and anything else that can go
100%
wrong?
confident, because any major things would probably be covered under insurance.
Right.
You know, um,
And for this
you
kind
know,
of work,
there's a lot of work that we have in the regular operational budget for maintenance and repairs. You know,
Okay.
but this building, it's beyond putting more duct tape on.
right. Okay, good, thank you.
Mr. Fike, are there any other buildings within the district that need a similar HVAC upgrade?
Within the next 2 or 3 years, I think we talked about this in our capital plan. The units at the junior high should start to be replaced. They're still good, but they're unit ventilators in the classrooms. There's rooftop units for the hallways and offices. They're still working, but they're old and they're getting past the end of life. We can still get parts for them, but I'm thinking 3 years down the road, and that's what I'm thinking. The other, $3 million left or whatever we have left in the capital will go towards the junior high. That I'm hoping, and Quandel's gonna look at that, doing that as an ESCO project where there's some federal funds. So, that might even cut the price in half if we do it as an ESCO, but that's a long drawn out process. They have to put data recorders in and start, taking information over a 6-month period. In fact, we were talking earlier that maybe they could put the data recorders in over the Columbus holiday, since the kids won't be in there. One thing I'm concerned about the junior high is, every classroom there, we run a dehumidifier in the classroom all summer with the drain going right into the sink. If we don't, it's a very humid building. Our hallways, the ceiling tiles sort of have a bow, and that happens when there's a lot of humidity. So that's another thing that has to be addressed there. But that's a whole HVAC project. And for that project, unit ventilators, I don't think we'd be able to do it this coming summer. I just think that probably the cost of those things happening right now would be skyrocketed. I think we have at least 2 years till we have to do that. My other concern is that should be over a 2-summer project, because that's a big job to try and tackle in 1 summer. We just barely got the elementaries done last summer. And when you have a junior high is twice the size, I wouldn't want to take the chance of starting a project and not being able to complete it before the kids came back in. So that'll maybe 23, 24 summers. We'd be looking at that one. Besides that, everything else, Walton's pretty new. Rifton is pretty new. We might have to look at the geothermal wells, to make sure they're not clogged or anything in the next 5 or 6 years. But that system should last a long time. That's just a revamp. There's money in the budget right now, which I was supposed to try to get done this summer, but we moved it to next summer for the recoating and redoing of the Rifton roof. But the product didn't come in till late August, and I wasn't going to do that with kids in. So that's actually going to start, I think, June 8th, as long as we don't have any snow days. They'll be doing that one. The high school, I think, was renovated less than 20 years ago, so that should be in good shape. We redid the chillers, I think, 4 or 5 years ago there. So, barring any major catastrophe or, Mother Nature hitting it, I think we're in fairly good shape. We have a lot of things that maintenance that's deferred. We have floor tiles, things like that, but we're like this year and future years, they'll be in the budget to be taken out of operations. I only feel capital should be major projects. Does that answer your question? I talk too much. Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
May I ask, why is this on the agenda for today versus being on the agenda in a few weeks from now?
It's 10 to 12 weeks to get the units in, and just wanted to try to get them done during the winter. Right now we know we can order units. I'm afraid of the supply chain.
I know that the building has been used for other uses. I know like we have the food bank in here now and things like that. Is there any other businesses that are thinking about maybe are we going to be renting some of this space out to the public or anything like that in the future?
I don't know of any rental. You know, we have community plans for the future. We have the wrestling club that's going back in at the end of this month. We have bands. We have other people that look, you know, the police department looks to do their annual training in our building. We allow community groups to use some of the conference rooms, things like that. So I don't know about renting the building, but for community, yeah, for community purposes, yes.
Right, thank you.
Not that I want to push this off, but I would rather see a list of all the things that you just said, because you just said a lot of projects that need done, and then compare, you know, take some time to digest how important this is compared to some other projects. A topic that probably nobody wants me to bring up is, you know, the pictures that were circulating of the high school cafeteria. You know, I'm just concerned, are there things that are more important, and maybe that's not considered a capital project, but, you know, are there things that are more important in regards to where our children are being taught that we should take care of first? And not saying
Yes.
this isn't important. 'cause I know
Mrs.
it's
Stratton,
listening, so-
I appreciate that. Actually, all of the items that Mr. Pike just went through were presented as part of the capital projects review that we had in June. So none of those are new. And then when we discussed the bus garage, we talked about there was a certain fund that, you know, Mrs. Guidish had assigned monies apart to that didn't have any timeline, and that we would be utilizing those funds. So all of those things have been reviewed. In terms of the photograph that was taken of the high school cafeteria by a student and placed on Facebook, that was a result of a leak, and those ceiling tiles, actually, by the time that it had been placed on Facebook, had been removed and replaced, and that repair has been addressed. So those day-to-day, you know, something springs a leak kind of repairs are all contained within our regular operating budget, so that, you know, we anticipate that there will be leaks, that there will be a storm, those sorts of things. So there aren't any projects that are, you know, posing student safety risk on any given day. For instance, you know, at Lorraine, a piece of playground equipment was broken. It had a jagged edge. We, you know, contacted the grounds department. They immediately roped off that playground equipment was, you know, moved, that sort of thing. So we respond to those concerns immediately. The disrepair in this building, in terms of HVAC and air quality, air circulation, it has been a long-standing problem. We've had a number of employees who actually had to relocate and work at other buildings because of the HVAC concerns. An employee filed suit against the district a couple of years ago because of the air quality issues in this building with mold, etc. So this has been a long-standing problem that the district has been aware of. If we're going to continue to have buildings that we don't want to tear down and have to rebuild in the future, we have to maintain them. The humidity, all those sorts of things cause damage to this. So in terms of the things that Mr. Fike listed, he gave a long list. I think he was trying to answer Mr. Chowdhury's question comprehensively, but none of those things were new. They've all been presented previously. And through the facilities committee, Dr. Fike's work with his department, with me, none of those things are a higher priority at this point in time than this particular project. And again, none of those are immediate student safety issues. Whenever there's an immediate student safety issue, it is addressed on the spot. And again, that ceiling tile, I think, is a perfect example of, you know, somebody saw something, took a picture, put it on Facebook. By the time I had sent that to Mr. Fike and he sent it to his team, that had already been replaced, had already been addressed. The contractor was already coming out to fix the underlying problem below the ceiling tile. So we do take that incredibly seriously, and we never postpone those types of projects.
I appreciate that, because I would bet that I'm not the only, you know, I'm on the board and I don't know that it's been taken care of. So I would bet that there's lots of community members that are not aware that the timeline of events that you just explained. So thank you for that. I can't remember what I did 5 minutes ago, let alone June. I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm curious if, you know, when all those items, I recall them being listed, was there a timeline with them? And if there was not, could you send that to me, since obviously I'm the one that does not recall the actual timeline of
Yeah.
those other
Yes,
budget
those things have associated timelines, and we can absolutely send that to you. And as far as, if people have questions, that sort of thing, again, I think one of the challenges in modern day school district operations is social media and Facebook, and whether or not that's a legitimate source of information about concerns, and then whether or not those should be addressed. Something like a ceiling tile issue in the high school. Again, that's kind of a typical thing. Something has a leak, it was immediately fixed. We had a problem in Jacksonville where we had a pipe leak earlier in the year. So we don't report, all of those kind of day-to-day. I think anybody who works in any company the size with a number of buildings, there are day-to-day maintenance issues that we take care of and that we address on the spot. But certainly, as a board member, as a community member, you're always welcome to inquire about something in particular and ask, if it's been fixed, and we're more than happy to do that. But we maintain an entire grounds department, an entire facilities department, a maintenance department, because every single day when you have as many buildings as we do and the age of many of our buildings, there are operational things that need to be addressed. So, I would encourage you, if you ever have any concerns, to reach out to Mr. Fike or I, and we'll be more than happy to give you an update. And you can certainly share that with anybody. We can put it out, but typically, trying to do it as a matter of course in social media, every single thing that we repair, fix, etc., doesn't seem practical. But if there's an overlying concern, we're more than happy to do that.
And I would just say, I think that's a great reminder to all of us, me as a board member, me as going to be just a community member and mom in a few months. I frequently have friends ask me, why do we have an early dismissal, or why is this for lunch? Well, as a board member, that's not my job. And I try to remind those individuals, what the chain of is, who do you go to for these questions? And so I think that that's a very valid point there, that as community members, we need to know who we go to. If it's a high school issue, you go to the principal, and you work through that chain of commands until you get an answer from someone, versus maybe going about it in a way that isn't going to be as productive as what you would like.
Yeah, I think that sometimes I question whether or not people remember that you can dial a number on here and talk to somebody, or you can only post things on social media. All of our offices have phones, they have secretaries, they have, a number of staff, and I think all of those people are responsive. They're happy to answer questions, whether it's what time is the play to, what's going on with the ceiling tile. If you want accurate information quickly about something that you're concerned about, absolutely to start at the level closest to the problem with a phone call is probably the quickest way to get the answer that you're looking for, the most accurate answer. And there are staff ready and willing to do that. So you're right, at the building level, to ask the high school principal, the main office staff, the transportation department to call the transportation director, the assistant director, all of us. Again, we have secretarial staff if we're not available to answer the phones, to forward that, but we really do want to get correct information to people. So that continues to be, in a school district, the most effective thing to do is to just call and ask.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay. If there are no objections, I will adjourn this meeting. Hearing no objections, this meeting is adjourned.
Mrs. Wilson, before we go into the next meeting, I'd like to call an executive session for personnel matter, please.
Could we actually just do the presentation for the debate club before that? Just so that they can leave.
That's fine. Debate club.
Do you want to do roll call first? Okay.
Okay,
Sure.
I just wanted. It's just a presentation from the committee for extracurricular that I want to present to the board. Just information.
You can stay there.
Okay. Okay, we'll do a roll call.
Allison Wilson,
Here.
Hunter Ahrens,
Here.
John Fiddler,
Here.
Dr. Ann Herring,
Here.
Dr. David Hemberger,
Here.
Michael Jupina, Anthony Chowdhury,
Here.
Harry Miller,
Present.
Michelle Stratton,
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Before I start, I'd like to thank Dr. Herring for inviting me to speak with you all today, Mr. Campbell for supporting me through this journey of starting a club, and Ms. Sharp and Ms. Gonzalez for being my club advisors and being very open to trusting a teenager to like making all these big decisions. Okay, so I started Exeter's debate team, and I would like to just inform you all of what we hope to accomplish. Statistics show, according to a document that I read, that 50% of high school students that go to urban high schools graduate, but 90% of urban high school students graduate. 90% of high school graduates graduate if they're in debate team. So I believe that debate team is very beneficial in student academics, and there is a very high increase of SAT and ACT scores for students who are in debate. Colleges love it. They see that debate team is a very good thing to have on your transcript because they see it as a leadership role and something that like it shows that you are very mature and you can talk about controversial topics in a mature manner. What I hope to accomplish in doing debate, I want our generation to be able to speak about controversial topics and hard topics in a calm manner. I know some adults today struggle talking about some like hard topics, so I really hope that we can end that chain and start something new with this generation. My advisors and I, we hope to join the National Debate and Speech Association so that we could compete with schools nearby, like Daniel Boone, I know, is doing debate team, Antietam. Schools just near us, they have debate team as well. We would like to compete with them with debate, and hopefully we can move on forward and do national debates, like with the country, with the state, with the county, all that. Students who win the National Debate Association tournament, they get up to $150,000 in college scholarships. So I see it as a really big prize for something that has lots of benefits to it. You could also wear honor cords during graduation, which I know a lot of students are looking forward to wearing something like that shows that like they're very good academically. A lot of my friends who have been doing debate in other school districts, they told me stories about how they were once that student in class who knew the answer to a question and were too hesitant to raise their hand because they just had very bad social anxiety. And after joining debate, they changed and became an entire new person, and they aren't like afraid to speak up. So I see it as something that could really be beneficial to shy students, and hopefully that'll make them more confident. It also opens up your mind. So if you have a very set mindset on something like a topic, doing debate, it could like open up your mind and like make you see topics in a new perspective. Because debates most often when you're assigned a debate topic, you're given whether you are pro that topic or con that topic. So you have to do that research regarding what viewpoint you are. So you will see a new mindset about certain points, and I think that's really beneficial that people are going to be they will learn how to be more open-minded. We just had our first meeting last Thursday. We had a very good turnout. 22 out of 30 people came to the meeting, and I think that's very good for a very new club. Our next meeting is this Thursday, and we hope to get students to have more of a feel of debating by assigning them topics and debating against each other regarding controversial topics. Some of the topics that we will be talking about at our next meeting is something simple. We're starting out with simple stuff like should animals be kept in zoos, or should schools have uniforms, stuff like that, simple stuff. And then we will work our way up to more controversial things like abortion laws, or stuff I don't know, just very controversial items that we hope that will teach students how to talk about stuff in a mature manner. And I think that's all I have today. This is very scary. Okay, that's all I have. I hope you guys will support this. I also know that there is a mock trial at school. This is very different than mock trial. Mock trial is more government and law based, and it is like future and aspiring lawyers are like more keen to join mock trial, and debate team is completely different than that. Debate team is more about more like variety of topics, and it's not like all government based. So I think that's what like a lot of people when they hear debate team, they think we have a mock trial. Why should we like spend our money into a new club when we have mock trial? I think mock trial is completely different. I know there's a lot of similarities that people think that they have, and they do, considering the fact that they debate against each other and like they argue. But I do think that there's a difference regarding law and stuff. So I really hope that you guys support this decision and see it as something that Exeter should try out. Thank you.
Alicia, I wanted to say thank you for coming out tonight. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
You answered
I didn't have
everything I
anything
wanted you to
prepared.
cover. I appreciate that. I did
Okay.
have quick questions. Can you quickly explain how you presented your wanting to start a club with the school? How did you get it going?
Okay. My cousin from New Jersey, he was telling me about how he's in debate, and he was telling me the benefits that I'm telling you now today. He was telling me these benefits. My mom overheard and was like, Elishba, why don't you do something like debate? It seems very beneficial. And I said, that's a good point. I'll like look into it. I'll join debate. I looked into it. I looked in the student extracurricular list. We didn't have it. So when I expressed this to my friends, they were like, just join mock trial. That's really similar. I looked into mock trial and I was like, this is more law based. I'm not into that. It's not really what I want to be when I grow up. I don't really I just don't want to do that. So then I talked to Mr. Wizaneski, a teacher at my school, and he said that I should like look into starting a club. So then I talked to Mr. Campbell. It was all very like, I didn't plan much of it, but I talked to him and we decided that I would just start debate team. And I'm glad that it's working out so far. And yes, that's how it started.
Great. It's wonderful to hear that you have the support that you do at the high school in that manner. I appreciate that. One last question that I have is, how can a student find this club? Or maybe Mr. Campbell can answer how they can find this club on Schoology, I believe it is.
Yes.
How can they join in that manner?
Yes, we have put it on E4 News, so we have been announcing it on E4 News. We announced it for about a week. We have, Mr. Campbell has posted an update on Schoology regarding like how to join, who to see. He also posted the Schoology group code, so anyone can like go into Schoology and just copy and paste the group code if they'd like, or they could see Miss Sharp, Miss Gonzalez, or me, and we can personally add them to the group. That's how and my mom also posted on Facebook about it. So she also posted the group code on there. So if any parents of children who are interested, they could join through there.
I would just make a comment that when I was a high school teacher, I was the assistant debate coach for a period of time and got to attend several of the tournaments. And it's extremely challenging academic organization. The students involved have to do a tremendous amount of research. The different types of debate are very, very rigorous. Top tier schools compete in that. So when I heard that debate was being formed, I was actually like, we don't have a debate team, kind of the same way that you were. So I thank you very much for bringing this forward and creating this opportunity for our students. I think that it will serve Exeter extremely well to have something like that, and that the students who are engaged, the reason that colleges look favorably upon it is because it really is a tremendous amount of work in terms of research, preparation, and then ultimately competition. So I do want to thank you for doing that, and I look forward to having the opportunity to attend one of the debates in the future and see our students compete at that level.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
I just also wanted to echo that. I was in mock trial in high school, and I can remember plenty of good things about my experience, but I remember one of my best friends' experience specifically. He played an expert witness in mock trial, and he said to me, I believe it was last year around Christmas, that was really the first opportunity and the first time that he really ever felt comfortable kind of talking or even finding comfort in talking in a public way. And that had really affected him. So I'm really excited to hear that that was one of the things that you pointed to as one of the impetuses for you really running with this. So I just encourage you to do that and have fun with it because that stuff is fun.
Yes.
You know, I'm 100% behind it. I think this is great. You know, in a time where there's a lot of social anxiety, people don't talk to each other and do all these things. I think this is perfect to kind of melt the ice for people to talk to each other and have some some debate. I
Yeah.
think it's great.
Same. I think you're fantastic. I think this idea is fantastic, and I wish I could join. My husband says I can debate with the best of them, so, but good luck.
Thank you.
I just had first of all, great job, very well presented. I have a question for the administration, or actually, for Dr. Miner. Does the board have any role in approving clubs? I mean, and will there be any sort of a budget or any changes in terms of personnel or assignment and that sort of thing?
Yes, well, typically, if an advisor is going to be assigned, it's, agreed upon as part of the co-curricular salary schedule in the contract. And so the board would approve the co-curricular, salary appointments for that position. I would have to call Mr. Campbell up because I'm not aware of the specifics of this, if it's starting as a volunteer and then transitioning. Mr. Campbell, would you mind coming up and talk about what the status of the advisors would be for this?
I'd just like to start by thanking Lishba for coming out to present tonight. As a former debate coach, she had me at Can We Start a Debate Team? And I'm very excited. I do think it's a very pure form of academic exercise, and it's a great experience for students. Dr. Hedberg, in terms of your question, all clubs are open for kids and advisors to begin and start engaging in activities. Those are voluntary and informal at first. And then as those establish themselves, they are presented to the committee that meets annually to review those for inclusion in the CBA as a formal advised and paid position. So that's currently the status of the debate team at this point, is it's advised and informal, but certainly has full support that can participate in events and competitions. We will certainly provide resources to it as needed for whatever reasonable events that they may have, so we can get this club up and going.
So we're at the very kind of beginning process. There's
correct.
Really no, I guess, approval by the board. I mean, it's great that we all think it's a great idea. But then there could come a time when you come back and you say you'd like to add an extracurricular position, as we're going to be looking later today, I think, in the agenda. I didn't see it in that memo that was provided to us. So I'm just glad you clarified, where this particular initiative would stand, with the others.
Yeah, there's a number of clubs that operate on that voluntary informal basis, some for an extended period of time until they really establish themselves enough that they want to pursue that formal paid advisorship.
Thank you.
Okay, we can go into executive session now. Then move on to the Education Committee, Mr. Fiddler.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. We have several items on the agenda, so I'd like to get right to the first one, and that is a report on the comprehensive plan. We have Dr. Flam on the agenda, but either Dr. Flam or Dr. Miner, doesn't really matter which one. So Dr. Flam, would you like to get started?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fiddler. And a copy of the comprehensive plan is attached to the agenda. As you know, districts must submit a comprehensive plan to the state every 3 years. This plan is written for through the year 2004. And I just wanted to point out a couple of items in the comprehensive plan. The first is the priority statements. There are 3 priority statements that are closely aligned with the district 100% goals. There's an early literacy priority statement. District will improve the curriculum articulation and the associated instructional practice to ensure that students meet the goal of 100% reading proficiency in grade 3. There's a mathematics priority statement. District will address the need for improved math fact fluency and the need for vertical curricular and instructional alignment in grades 5 through 8 math so that students will meet our goal of 100% math proficiency by grade 7. And finally, a graduation rate priority statement. The district will develop pathways to graduation that meet individual needs so that students meet our goal of 100% graduation rate. With these 3 priority statements, there are strategies and action steps accompanying. With regard to the early literacy priority statement, there are 3 strategies with action steps, one focusing on foundations, training on maximization of foundations as a phonics and word study, tool for kindergarten through 2nd grade as part of the early literacy block in the 21-22 schedule. The next strategy, a refresher training on leveled literacy intervention, which is a tool used for Tier 3 intervention, students in K through 4. And finally, our balanced literacy framework, enhancement of the balanced literacy framework at the K4. This is the Fountas and Pinnell work that our literacy coordinator and our teachers have started this summer. F&P classroom book clubs, interactive read-alouds, phonics and word study, independent readers, as well as guided and shared reading. With regard to our math priority, the 2 strategies and action steps associated with the mathematics priority statement are the junior high school math programming and alignment, restructuring of the Rifton School and junior high math programming and alignment, grades 5 through 8, currently using investigations and college prep math, and the adaptive support for learning gaps. So the IXL tool is a resource for targeting learning gaps in mathematics for students. And we want to focus on the use of IXL as an adaptive support. With regard to graduation rate, the strategies and action steps are career internship program, developing a robust career internship program for senior high school credit, as well as check and connect, with emphasis on checking and connecting with students at risk of not graduating, with our teachers serving as mentors. And there are associated professional development and communication steps aligned with these priority statements and strategies and action steps. This is a broad plan that follows the PDE planning template and is not representative of all that we're doing in the district. With regard to timeline, in March, Dr. Winters, prior to his leaving, presented to the steering committee an initial draft of the plan. In early April, I then presented the first presentation to the Ed Committee. And then this evening, I'm obviously presenting to the Ed Committee of the board again. Tomorrow, we'd like to post this comprehensive plan to the website and make it available in hard copy form in each of the buildings, as well as at the Exeter Public Library. In November, at the Committee of the Whole, I'd like to come back and give an update to the board regarding the public review. And at that meeting, make recommendation that it be moved forward to the November 16th meeting for school board vote.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Flam. Any questions from my colleagues on the board?
I do have a question. I'd like to, a professional educator in the audience to just sort of answer this statement if you could. The reality is no one system is going to be perfect. There's not one true way of teaching reading, as the brain was not designed to read or write. Some people learn one way, some learn another. Many need a hybrid of many methods. It is the duty of the educational practitioner to be familiar with multiple approaches to meet the diverse needs of the readers in front of them. Failure to do so is true malpractice. Can I get a sense from our educators here on that statement?
Yes, I do think it takes a variety of approaches, and we're doing our best to train our teachers in a variety of methods and instructional practices to meet the needs of all of our students.
So the plan that we have in place is but one element, and that's what's emphasized on the comprehensive plan, but there are other things that occur in the classrooms, is that?
Certainly.
Can we elaborate on that just a little bit, please?
Certainly. In terms of the difference between the comprehensive plan and what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, or in terms of the approach to teaching a student how to read or any other subject? Can you just clarify your question, please, Mr. Chavino?
I guess I'm not really sure what I'm asking, Dr. Miner, but I guess what I would say is that we talk about Fontes and Pinnell, but I know that there's much more that occurs. We talk about teaching to the level of the student, this differentiated learning, which in a classroom of 23 students, you may be teaching things 23 different ways, and I'm wondering how we account for that.
Well, it's an excellent question. One of our, goals that we've established and we've reaffirmed through the comprehensive plan is that we want to have 100% of our students reading at grade level by the end of third grade. Third grade, we've established is considered in the research a pivotal time for students in terms of the difference between learning to read and reading to learn. Fundamentally, learning to read is comprised of two main areas. There's certainly more subdivisions of that, but the two primary areas are decoding, understanding that the symbols have sounds, how those sounds go together to form words, etc. Decoding. Encoding is what we say about writing, using those symbols to then encode. And then comprehension. Do you, in fact, understand what the text is saying? So, for instance, one of the examples I frequently give is that if someone presented me with an astrophysics book, I would be likely able to decode all of the words. I understand the rules of the language. I understand how letter-sound correspondence works. But I wouldn't have comprehension because I don't have schema. I don't have background knowledge. I don't have the training to really understand what I'm decoding. And that makes learning to read very complex. And I think what was referenced in your quotation is the fact that learning to read is, in fact, not a natural human behavior. Natural human behaviors include walking, talking, eating, but humans existed for a long period of time without having any kind of written code. So that's not something that's developmentally appropriate necessarily at any particular age, and it has to be explicitly taught to most children. So the reason that we use foundations in particular is that Barbara Wilson is a well-known reading researcher. Specifically, she began her career in the field of dyslexia and people who struggled with the code, and she created Wilson Reading, which the board has approved previous conferences for teachers to attend so that students who really struggle at the special education level can partake of her research and studies relative to that. And Barbara Wilson then recognized that there was a role for a preventative strategy instead of a reactive strategy, which Wilson is. And she developed foundations, it's broader known as an Orton-Gillingham approach, where it's direct, explicit instruction about how the code works, about how letters and sounds go together. So for instance, the idea that when you have a vowel consonant E pattern the vowel in the center of the word is pronounced as a hard vowel instead of a soft vowel. So these things are explicitly taught to children. And one of the things that I think most people find amazing when they start to do, go to these classrooms is how much of the code we don't really know what explicitly is done. So another example I would give is the way that Foundations approaches the alphabet is to not have students sing the alphabet song. If you've ever seen a child at an early age sing the alphabet song, there tends to be this one letter called LMNOP, right, which is not, in fact, a letter. And so Barbara Wilson, has very carefully chunked the alphabet into the letters that students encounter first. They don't learn it just in alphabetical order. And they break when they say the letters, and the materials, etc., break when they say the letters, so that it's A, B, C, D, E, F, and then a pause. And then there's another pause at L. There's a pause when you get down to S's. And those happen to be the letters that are always doubled at the end of words, or almost always doubled at the end of words. There's some exceptions. And all of this is extremely intentional to support students really understanding the intentionality of the code. Other things that happen are words like the, which is what Wilson and Foundations refers to as a trick word. There's no way to sound out the word the. You can't say t and have a word, right? The just doesn't make any sense. And yet it's a really common sight word. So it's important to teach the code very explicitly. So we do that preventatively in K1 and 2 with Foundations. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is comprehension, is schema, is background knowledge, is fluency, all of those other things that you have to do to be an accomplished reader. And so for that, we turn to the work of Faunis and Pinnell, who are the authorities who wrote the original book on guided reading. And one of their more recent and more important works is a book called The Literacy Continuum. And in the book, The Literacy Continuum, they discuss the various components of reading, including phonics and word study, the importance of shared reading, where students, work with the teacher on reading, guided reading, where students work at their independent level, interactive read aloud, independent reading. There's tremendous complexity to that. And so the materials that we've purchased with Faunis and Pinnell Classroom address all of those different components layered on with the Foundations. Beyond that, then, to your point about students acquiring reading at different rates, struggling with reading, we this year have implemented a response intervention approach, which we assess students' reading skills initially, and then through a screener, and I'm actually going to present that data this evening. And then students who come up as potentially at risk, we do follow up with a diagnostic assessment administered by a reading specialist. And then we target an intervention to the students based on those specific needs, so that if students come up and they need an intervention and the team sees that the specific errors that the student makes are fundamental to decoding or fundamental to comprehension, they can adjust the intervention to that specific student need. Students who are reading successfully at grade level or above grade level, we're offering them the Junior Great Books program, and there is tremendous opportunity within that to self-differentiate, so that students are asking the questions, and the extent to which you're able to produce higher level questions, higher level thinking, you're able to differentiate within that. The same thing happens at the guided reading table, where students who may be performing above grade level have the opportunity to interact with those specific texts. So it's really designed to meet students both systemically, so that everybody has access to decoding, everybody has access to comprehension instruction, but individually, so that there is these carved out times in guided reading and response to intervention that are unique to the needs of what that individual student data is showing us. So it is a comprehensive approach. In terms of the comprehensive plan itself, there was a time, 15, 20 years ago when school districts began the strategic planning process, and it was truly about having a visionary idea, involving stakeholders, and producing a strategic plan in a more conventional business sense. And then I would say maybe 15 years ago, when No Child Left Behind came out, there was tremendous pressure on the states for PSSAs or another type of common assessments. The state changed it from strategic planning to comprehensive planning, and they really narrowed the things that school districts could do. And it became mostly about compliance, saying that you will take these things seriously, you will follow the state standards, et cetera. So what's represented in our comprehensive plan, is really an assurance to the state that we will in fact meet those requirements, but in no way is it representative of the entire scope of what we're doing with our reading program. And as we continue to collect data about where our students are, where our students' needs are collectively and individually, I would anticipate that our approach would evolve over time as new materials and resources come out. For instance, we just started this year to use the writing mini lessons book produced by Faunus Pinnell. That's only available in kindergarten and first grade, as that comes out in second, third, et cetera. So I think it's really imperative for a school district to have both that base coverage of decoding and comprehension, but then both in terms of individual student needs changing over time and system needs changing over time, being able to be agile and responsive to that. So we don't want to nail ourselves down in a plan to the state that's a 3-year plan with too many specifics that then don't allow us to have that agility and flexibility. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
No, I think you did, and actually led to another question, which was sort of a topic of an email chain earlier today. Could you discuss how support is provided to students in a differentiated way? So for those who might be considered struggling versus those who are quote unquote not struggling, because when I look at teacher preparation, I know that you're preparing for everybody in that classroom and everybody's getting support to the level that they need. And I guess I'm wondering if you can further explain that, because I think it matters in terms of understanding, how our approach, to this is.
Well, I think that's another excellent question, Mr. Chapina. One of the pitfalls of a differentiated approach to instruction is if you, as an administrator, as a teacher, decide that differentiation means a different outcome versus a different approach. So many years ago, Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe did work, called Understanding by Design. I know you've been on the board for a while. Maybe that's something that had come across your desk. But fundamentally, the principle is that the standards and the outcomes around those standards are non-negotiable. Everyone has to get to that point. But the pathway to get to that point can be differentiated, right? So you can differentiate approach, you can differentiate speed, you can differentiate methodologies, project-based learning, directed instruction. But everybody has to come out at least the same place. So when we say 100% of students have to read proficiently on the PSSA, that is our metric. That is then a non-negotiable goal that is not differentiated. Every student needs to at least accomplish that floor. The pathway to get there for one particular student might be intensive work with the reading specialist. For another student, they may walk in the door able to do that. And so then our responsibility to that student is to make sure that they're enriched and that they continue to grow. So you always simultaneously have to be looking at both the standardized metrics like the PSSA, grade level achievement, you're able to do that, as well as individual student growth. Is every student who comes through the door growing at least a year in a year's time, right? Because if you have a student who comes in reading proficiently at grade 3 and they leave at the exact same level, you've wasted that student's entire year. So it's really both of those things. It's saying this is the baseline. 100% of students have to read. That's fundamental. But for the students who already come to us as readers or easily achieve that milestone, are they making at least a year's growth in a year's time so that every single student is getting the full value out of a school year and nobody is either bored or, and there's some students who have to make 2 years growth in a year's time to ultimately catch up. They actually have to work faster than other students because they start out at a deficit. So it is a complex endeavor that certainly, is not satisfactorily captured in something like a comprehensive plan, but it's something that our team talks about, considers, looks at today. We spent the day, all of the principals walking through classrooms at Owatton Creek and talking about instructional practice that we take very seriously because we've set very high bars and getting there is going to take very, very serious reflection on all aspects of teaching and learning.
So I would encourage people to read the comprehensive plan. I also took the time over the last couple of days to read the comprehensive plans for Manheim Township, Quakertown School District, North Hills and Allegheny County, Lower Marion, Northwestern Lehigh, Wilson, and Boone. Not any of them in any of their goals called for 100% reading at level or math at level. So when I look at that assessment, I remember having a conversation with Mrs. Wilson and saying, who the hell promises 100% of anything in a document? Because, that doesn't happen. A baseball player doesn't hit 1,000. A quarterback doesn't throw all of his passes for completions. And Allison's comment to me was, who do you want to leave behind, Mike? What kid do we want to leave behind? And never before in what I've seen in previous comprehensive plans have we called that out. It's a very high bar. By the way, in reading the state document, it is a typical state document. I honestly didn't find a whole lot of value in it. It seemed to be left to the discretion of whoever wanted to fill that document out and whatever they wanted to say. I thought it was the document that we completed was very direct and very open and very honest and reflective of where we are and where we need to go. So I would encourage, though, people to look at this document as well as to look at other documents for perspective. Thank you.
I have a statement too, or a question. I think right now, sometimes there's still a perception that a teacher just stands up in front of the room and teaches. And really, we want our students working in the classroom. We want the students actively engaged constantly, and teachers then offering their support mostly individually. So could you talk a little bit about what does it look like for the students? What are they doing in the classrooms?
Certainly. So again, there's multiple different literacy segments of the day, depending on the grade level. So in K-2, the instruction in foundations is direct, explicit instruction, and it involves everything from whole body activities such as skywriting, where a student points, because younger students have more difficulty with fine motor skills, and so incorporating that gross motor skills, so students are actively engaged in that, writing, etc. Often the students transition over to a carpet, to a reading center where a teacher is reading out loud. They're asking students to turn and talk, have conversations, discussions about the book during the interactive read aloud. During a shared reading piece, students may be following along with the teacher with the pointer. They may be reading chorally. They may be discussing vocabulary, phrasing, that sort of thing. Students are writing independently. They're reading independently. They're encouraged to select their own books and engage in that task. They are having book clubs and other types of discussions. So every day we are trying to engage all of the different components of literacy, from speaking, writing, listening. And one of the things that's really important too, and I think is a challenge, is the concept that in order for students to build background knowledge and ultimately have comprehension, if you confine a student to only accessing material that they can decode themselves, they don't ultimately develop the phrasing and the vocabulary knowledge that they need to ultimately be successful comprehenders. So for instance, if I can only read a Dick and Jane type text and that's all I'm exposed to, I'm not going to be able later to have the information that I need, which is why we encourage parents to read to their children. We have teachers read to their children. We have students listen to reading, because before you can take it in through your eyes, before you've managed to learn all the rules of the language and decoding, you can take it in through your ears. Students who are cognitively intact at a very young age can really expand their vocabularies. They can really expand their knowledge. For instance, I can give an example. Today in Watton Creek, we were in a first grade class, and one of the things that was said in the book was an individual laid the table, and what does that mean? That they, and look at the pictures and think about that. Most students, in fact, none of the students in the class had ever heard somebody use that particular expression in the language. So then there's a conversation, and when we encounter when we encounter something we've never encountered before, how do we use the picture clues? How do we use context clues? So it's, reading is an extremely complex endeavor and a non-natural human behavior, but it is, fundamental to everything else that we do. So a student day is comprised of a wide variety of literacy tasks, and again, some students are spending more time developing those fundamental school skills. Some students come to us with those skills. Some students come to us with a tremendous amount of background knowledge. Some students don't, and so we're constantly trying to assess where they are, what they need, and how can we deliver that to them in the most effective way possible.
Anything else on the comprehensive plan?
I have a more general question about reading for Dr. Miner and Dr. Flam. How are we instilling and reinforcing a love of reading at Exeter?
Oh, that's another terrific question, and it's actually extremely important. The best way to get better at anything is to spend a lot of time doing it. Right, so musicians. In fact, the person who created First in Math, which is something that we're using with our math fact fluency, gave professional development to our staff last summer, and he talked about something like learning to play a violin, and that people who become extremely proficient at a violin, they spend very little time learning new skills and a tremendous amount of time practicing those skills. Right, that's fundamental to actually becoming expert at something. Reading is no different. The more time you spend reading, the better you get at reading. And the only way to get kids or anybody to spend a lot of time doing something is to make it something that they enjoy, right? To make it something that they feel successful with, that they love to do. And the more we can celebrate reading, can make it something that's desirable, exciting for kids, the more reading that they're going to do. So everything from really improving our classroom libraries, our libraries in general, access to periodicals, having books that students are interested in, being really conscious of what kind of books might a reluctant reader read. If I'm a student who hasn't traditionally read, but I'm really interested in sports, are we providing books in sports? If I'm a student who is older and I am reading at a younger grade level, is the content of the books that is available to me of interest to my age level, while the actual decoding skills are at a lower level, right? Really being thoughtful about the materials that we're presenting students. Making reading something that we celebrate holistically in the buildings, that we reward, we get excited about, teachers get excited about. You hear, different people reading aloud, principals reading aloud, that sort of thing. Using books, as rewards. Talking again to families, and I was having a conversation with a parent just this week that, sometimes when a parent sees their child is struggling, they start talking about, well, we're working on reading at home. And I'm like, stop. Don't do that. Read to your child and then give them easier books that they can feel successful with, right? Like if they feel like they're struggling, if they feel like they're bad at that task, then that's going to create task aversion. They're not going to engage in it. So read out loud to them and then give them easy books that they can read with pride, with fluency, all of those things. We tend to do the exact opposite. So we're really trying to permeate our school culture to be one that reading is the center of what we do, and we love reading, and it's exciting and it's fun every single day. I know that there are a couple elementary principals here. Dr. Master, I believe, is she still back there? Yes, and Mrs. Cobold. So Dr. Master, I don't know if you want to say a couple things about what you've been doing in Jacksonville to instill a love of reading, but I know you always do that with great excitement, so I'll give you that opportunity. You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. I tend to yell into a mic, so forgive me. My voice kind of sends itself. One thing we like to do is marry our PBIS, our Positive School Behavior Intervention and Support Plan, with our academics. So one thing that we did this year as a school is we have a mentor text. And that mentor text is Salt in His Shoes by Michael Jordan. And it talks about going and persevering and getting grit and having patience. And we talk about that each month. So the teachers read it to their students, They did like a shared read. So what that means is they read a little bit, they discussed a little bit about it, they had this conversation. And based on that, then we started to look at where we see that in our personal lives. So each month when I do have an assembly in a safe location, it's during lunch. I'm able to, we have like a lunch bunch, but it's actually an assembly. We talk about what it means to have grit, like to wish for something. He wished he was taller. Well, do you wish for things? Sometimes we wish for things and we have to really work. And we have to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, even when it's not the easy thing to do. So we start talking about what that really means. And now we have students interested in picking out books and reading books and rereading it. So when I held out the book, they were like, oh, we already read that in class. And they were super excited that they already read it in class. For kindergarten, the first week of school, I went down and read a book to kindergarten because I wanted to introduce myself to them and let them see, like, show me you mean business. What does it mean when someone comes into the room and is going to share a story with you? What does that look like? What's the posture? How do I know that you're really listening? And so I got a chance to get to know them through reading a story. And then I followed up with one of my favorite pigeon books, which they get interactive, and I wear a boa and I act the pigeon out because I want them to see that reading is really fun and we don't stop reading. Like adults are reading. So we have a stop, drop, and read where the teacher picks up a book, the students pick up a book, and we're all silently reading to ourselves. So we try to find ways that we could really engage students and make reading an activity that's fun so that when they look at their teacher, because who doesn't want to be like their teacher when they grow up, they see that their teacher's reading and they want to read too because their teacher loves it, and we just build that culture of and love for reading. So that's a few things we're doing at Jacksonville.
Thank you, Dr. Muster. Mr. Fiddler, did that address your question?
Absolutely. As a product of this school district, I'll share just one quick story about sixth grade at Jacksonville with Edry Watson, whom I had the pleasure of inducting into the Exeter Academic Hall of Fame last year. She read to us two books, at least. I don't remember all of them. One by Boy George, George Orwell, and one by Girl George, George Eliot, Animal Farm, and Silas Marner. Now, none of us in sixth grade could have possibly have read those books and understood them, but hearing them, hearing two of our great writers in English and how they handled the language was very inspiring to us. And I'm just curious, are we still doing that here at Exeter? Are we reading to our kids at a level that's maybe 2, 3, 4? I mean, I went to college with people who had never read those books, yet I heard them. It was sort of a human version of audiobooks. Are we doing that here at Exeter?
Yes. So, Mr. Fiddler, that's actually as part of our professional development study as an administrative group. You know, we read a book called The Knowledge Deficit, and it talks specifically about students coming with large word gaps and large gaps in background knowledge, and that the best way to get after that is, in fact, by reading books that students can't read themselves. And so incorporating read alouds, and specifically ones that students can't access, has been really important. It was actually a fundamental part of our Talents and Tips program this summer. I personally selected books for the students to read, for teachers to read out loud to students, and they included The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, all sorts of kind of classic texts that students, at that grade level, especially our struggling readers, wouldn't have been able to read. They loved the books, and you could judge that by when they had the opportunity to select new books, how many of the students selected those read aloud books, knowing full well that they couldn't read them themselves at this point, but they aspired to do that or have their parents do that. So absolutely, that's an integral part of what we're doing right now is reading aloud, both because you hear phrasing, vocabulary, you build background knowledge, and as we think about the social emotional learning work of schools, having someone read to you is a very nurturing thing, right? That's why parents do it before bedtime, etc. So the connection that students make with their teacher, the fond memories that you have of your teacher doing that, it really encompasses all kinds of things that are fundamentally important to student success.
Great, thank you very much. I do have other questions, but we also have a long agenda, so let's move on. I can bring those questions up later, And I think we are going to hear next again from you, Dr. Miner, on the K to 6 fall reading data.
Dr. Miner, can I just answer one more thing? And
Oh,
I'll
I'm
be really
sorry.
quick. I apologize. I just want to say one more thing too, Mr. Fiddler. As a parent, some things that I've noticed that the school is doing that are fantastic, and I don't know if they're at every building level. I can only speak from my own experience, but one of the programs or one of the things that they've done is one book, one school, where the entire school is reading the same book, and at school the teachers read to the students one chapter, and then it comes home and we read the next chapter, and it goes back and forth until the book is finished. I don't know what it's called, but there's also a program, I think it's usually in the springtime, where the library comes up with some books. I believe the library comes up with them, and they send home some suggestions, and then the kids get to color in the map of Pennsylvania. I don't know what that's called. So there's some suggestions from the library for kids to read, and then I know Riften also does an author visit. When an author comes in, the kids have the opportunity to actually purchase the book, and they get to hear from the author themselves. So those are just a few things that I've noticed the school doing wonderfully.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Mr. Martin, can you project the fall 2021-2022 K-3 reading screening data presentation, please? So one of the things that we have talked about as we've established our goals is the importance of not just having an annual, this is what the PSSA said, this is what the Keystone says in terms of where our students are, but regularly reporting to the board regarding where our students are and how they're moving in the course of the school year in relation to the various initiatives that we've put in place, including response to intervention, co-teaching, the new reading materials, etc. All those comprehensive things that we've discussed earlier this evening. So in light of that, and this was also laid out at the Education Committee the last time we met, there will be 3 primary times when we collect reading screening data for our students: in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. And what I would like to do tonight is to just introduce the board to what those reports will look like. And then when I bring the data back in February, when I bring it back at the end of the school year, the board will be able to make an apples to apples comparison in terms of how our students are in fact progressing in real time relative to their reading success, in addition to the reports on the PSSA and the Keystone, etc. So this data is not surprising or new. It's certainly reflective of what we saw when we looked at the PSSAs and other things. We know that our students aren't succeeding in reading, haven't historically been. But again, the way that it's presented tonight will then be replicated in future presentations so that it's easy to compare. Now, that being said, the cohort itself often changes. If you have 100 students, you may have 10 students move out and 10 students move in. And so it's never an exact science, but I think it will give all of us a good ballpark estimation of how things are going. So if you go to the first slide, please. This is the fall screening data from the STAR Computer Adaptive Assessment, the early literacy at Jacksonville. And what I want to point out to the board here is there is a white line that runs across, and it says Proficiency Benchmark. So that is where a kindergartner should be at the beginning of kindergarten, where that white line is. And what you can see there is that there is at least one student who is extremely successful. And so the team would be asked to look at what's happening with that student. Are they being appropriately challenged? Should they be identified for gifted education, et cetera? Because you can see that one student's data is anomalous to the others. That's that very long green part there. And so anybody who's in green is basically where we would want them to be at the start of kindergarten. The students who are in blue, the terminology that STAR uses, they're on watch. They're close to being proficient, but they're not there. And so they could really go either way. The students who are in yellow are in need of an intervention. They're pretty significantly far off the proficiency benchmark. And the students who are in red are in need of an urgent intervention. And again, you can see that very last bar being quite desperate in terms of where that is. One thing that is important, and I'll remind you of it at the mid data point and at the end data point, is that white bar moves. So when you see the shift in the red, yellow, that bar will move to a higher score because at the mid-level point, there's a higher level that you should be at. At the end of the year, there's a higher level. So this is actually a moving target. It's not a fixed target that we're looking to achieve. So again, just try to tuck that away in the back of your mind for future presentations. In terms of just a summary of what that means, 55% of kindergarten students at Jacksonville are not currently at benchmark for reading, aren't where we would like them to be when they walk through the door. Oh, next slide, please, Mr. Martin. Thank you. So again, you can just see the overview. 45% of students are where we would like them to start the year. More than 50% are not. Next slide, please.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You're probably going to answer this question, Dr. Miner, but what does that tell us about a kindergartner starting school versus a kid who's in first grade or second grade?
In terms of
their reading performance as it relates to this chart. I mean, assumption being that a kid has showed up without.
Yeah, kindergarten data is actually really tricky. One of the things we talk about is how difficult kindergarten is in general. Sometimes we have students who present to us and they don't know any letters, they don't know any sounds, they don't know how to read their name. And it's impossible to distinguish whether or not that's because they have a learning disability or because they just haven't had exposure. At the age of 5, every week and month is a big chunk of your life. Some kids, it just clicks on. And so initially, you don't really know what to make of the data. And what we tend to see is in the first 12 weeks, some kids that we were really worried about, didn't know any letters, didn't know any sounds, suddenly they get exposed properly and they take off and they do terrifically. Other students, it turns out, they actually really do have something that's much more significant. So kindergarten data, obviously, we would like to see a much higher percentage of kids come to us with kindergarten readiness, but it's data that I always take with a grain of salt. I'm much more concerned about where students are at the mid-year point, where they've been exposed to our curriculum, they've been exposed to our interventions, and if we still see students struggling at that point, it may be more indicative of an actual underlying concern. It's very hard to separate out what is just preschool exposure in the home from what is actually a potential difficulty. Right, and of course, as Ms. Wilson pointed out last year, obviously preschool, lots of students didn't attend preschool potentially, et cetera. So I think kindergarten is always a little bit of a wild card. This is first grade. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. Mr. Martin and the board, again, the point is more to just show you where we are now so that when we bring back later data, you can compare it. First grade, if you click to the next slide, again, the summary. I'm going to turn so I can actually see what you're seeing rather than my screen. Oh. Well, thank you. Would you mind doing that, Dr. Flam? Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Trina, and Dr. Flam for the assistance. So Jacksonville first grade summary. Again, here we have 42% of students who aren't where we would like them to be. And that's, what our current status is. Again, here you can see 10% of students are showing that they need an urgent intervention, 9% an intervention, 23% are kind of riding that bubble right now. Next slide, please, Mr. Martin. This is Lorraine's kindergarten. Works exactly the same way. Can you go to the summary slide, please? And in Lorraine, 49% of students are where we would want them to be entering kindergarten in terms of their reading readiness skills. Next slide, please. Lorraine's first grade. Next slide. 52% of students are where we want them to be in Lorraine at this time. Owatton Creek. Next slide. 55% of Owatton Creek. So you can see that it's pretty consistent across all of the buildings. Owatton Creek tends to have slightly better scores. That is on a non-Title I building. So that would be demographically expected, but all of the schools we're seeing about a 50% range of students really where we want them to be in terms of grade level expectations. Next slide. So there's the bar chart again. And so when we look in the winter and the spring, what you'll want to see is fewer students in the red, fewer students in the yellow, fewer students in the blue. more students solidly in the green and more students solidly above that proficiency benchmark line. Next slide. And there's the breakdown at Watton Creek in first grade. 62% of students are where we would like them to be for the beginning of first grade. Next slide, please. Jacksonville second grade. Here you can see a big swath of kids who are in the red. That's very concerning because now we're approaching that third grade benchmark, and those kids have a lot of gap to make up, which is why our interventions, our core programs are so critically important. Summary, please. So here, now that we're in second grade, only 35% of our students at Jacksonville are where we would like them to be at this point in the beginning of second grade. Next slide. Jacksonville's third grade, again, a huge swath of red. You can actually see that the red is building over time. The tasks become more complex. And again, that becomes harder and harder to close, but imperative that we do. Next slide. So 46% of third graders are where we want them to be at this point in Jacksonville. Next slide. Lorraine, second grade, very similar pattern. When we talk about it being a systems problem, when we talk about it being a leadership problem, when we talk about it being about schedules and resources, time and intervention across the district, that it's not unique to individual teachers or individual students, the data bears that out. You can see the same pattern play at every building and every grade level. Next slide. 33% of students in second grade at Lorraine are where we want them to be. Next slide, please. Lorraine, third grade, same thing. You can see that the students who are red, the number of students who are incredibly far off the benchmark, and the gap that needs to be made up there in short order. Next slide. 44% of students at Lorraine are where we want them to be. Fully 26%, over 1 in 4 children at Lorraine in third grade need an urgent intervention. That number should be statistically about 5%, not 25%. Next slide, please. Watton Creek, second grade, same pattern. Summary slide. 56% of students are where we would like them to be. Next slide. Watton Creek's third grade. Again, you can see the huge dip and the difference between where students are and the proficiency benchmark. Next slide. And you can see again, Watton Creek, 1 in 5 students are that urgent intervention. Statistically, that should be at 5%. Only 60% of students are where we would like them to be right now. Next slide. I believe that is the last slide, if I'm not wrong, Mr. Martin. So that concludes that presentation. Again, the primary purpose is to give the board a sense of where we're beginning this year, so that when we come back to you with the spring and the winter data, we'll show those that series of summaries and that series of bar charts against where we are in the spring. Any questions?
So Dr. Miner, that represents maybe 800 kids, 1,000, 600, something like that. So what happens between now and when they're tested again? And I don't mean what happens in the classroom, but then how are they tested? How do you test 1,000 kids for your February report? Like, how does that work?
Right. So in this particular tool, this is the bar charts were generated and these scores were generated from the STAR Computer Adaptive Assessment. So it is a computer-based assessment. It takes approximately 18 minutes to administer, and it's assessment that responds specifically to what a student answers on the first question. So the first question begins at a grade level expectation. So if you're a third grader, it would have you reading a paragraph. If you read a paragraph successfully, the adaptive assessment says, okay, Mr. Jabina can read a paragraph successfully. That means that he can read a sentence. That means he knows what a word is. That means he understands letter-sound correspondence, all of those things. And then the next question it asks you is either 2 paragraphs or it's more complex, and it keeps going up. When you start to make errors, it goes down. And so it's designed so that you can show a student, for instance, who is very high, like we talked about, really off the charts beyond grade level, or a student who's very low. So if you missed the first paragraph, it would then ask you a sentence. If you couldn't read a sentence, it would then ask you a word, and it would continue to go down until it was able to assess at what point were you really able to read? Did you know letters? Did you know sounds, etc.? So it's actually quite remarkable, and its accuracy compared to benchmark assessments, compared to other tools that we use, is quite high. It has a really good correlation. There's some nice white papers on its connection to the PSSA. So the fact that it could be administered in 18 minutes means that really in one day we can assess all of those students. And not only can we assess all of them, but those results are instantaneously available in the form of a number of different reports, including these. To me as a superintendent, I can see the performance of every single child in the district. The building principal can see every child in their building. The reading specialist can see every child in their building. The classroom teacher can see every child in their class. So that short time it takes to administer this, the high degree of accuracy, and the instant availability of results means that in real time we can make decisions and intervene. The tool also allows us to progress monitor students, so those students who are in urgent intervention and getting intensive support from the reading specialist right now, they'll actually take this JAR with far more frequency. They won't just take it 3 times a year for the general screening. They'll take that assessment once every 2 weeks, so that the reading specialist can monitor in real time their individual slope of growth relative to the grade level standard to ensure that they're in fact making progress at the speed and trajectory that they need to meet the benchmark.
Dr. Marner, will you also talk about how this report, these are building reports, but how you're able to print out the STAR reports to share with parents?
Yes, a couple of things. One, why I really do appreciate this tool is it has a lot of different reporting capabilities. So on the October in-service day, I will actually be working with teams of teachers about what reports they can use in terms of instructional planning, how they can make that data actionable in their individual classrooms. And then in November, I will be meeting with teachers again on the professional development day to talk to them about what report they can share with parents at conferences, and the expectation will be that they share that report as the foundation of conferences in terms of showing exactly where a student is really having a high degree of success, where a student may be struggling, and then talk about what they're doing in the classroom to meet that student where they are. So really, that first time that parents will see this report is at the conference table. We need to train teachers up to really be able to explain and talk through that, but that's built into our professional development plans.
Dr. Miner, we've seen a widespread indication of urgent intervention needed. Can you give us some examples of what that urgent intervention will look like?
Yes. So over the past week, Claire McCrae, our new literacy specialist, has, I think, run 21 individual data meetings with grade level teams, reading specialists, intervention specialists, ESL, special education teachers, where they've looked at this data along with the benchmark assessment data, and then they've assigned students to tiers for support. Parents have received letters regarding what kind of support and with whom their child will be receiving. And in fact, that began at all of our schools yesterday. So they're already engaged in this work. So a student who needs an urgent intervention, which is the question that you asked specifically, those students are assigned with a maximum number of 4 students, because that's what the literacy intervention calls for, with a reading specialist, and they're grouped together specifically by their level, so that students who are at A level are working together versus students who are at a C level. And for a half an hour, they're getting that intensive support from a highly trained individual in this research-based program. And that program incorporates all kinds of the different aspects of reading we talked about, from decoding to comprehension, etc. Students also are sent home with black and white books to practice. They come back, they discuss it the next day. So it's really an intensive program. It takes a significant amount of training. We've had professional development for all of our specialists in utilizing that program. So the students who are getting urgent intervention support right now are doing it 4-to-1 with a reading specialist every single day for 30 minutes with a research-based intervention.
Thank you. You mentioned that a letter goes home to the parents. What, if any, role do the parents play in correcting these problems?
Well, again, I would say that parental support and involvement is always critical, but we get paid and schools exist to do the work of teaching students to read. We certainly appreciate everything that parents do, and the more parents support and are engaged, the better. But we certainly can't rely on parents to do this. It's complex, it's difficult, and so, we take ownership for the success. What we always would hope a parent would do is read aloud to their child, is encourage a love of reading. Again, seek to support students, make them feel successful, make reading fun. Have conversations with the teacher if they have concerns about their child, to make sure that they're talking to their teacher, the reading specialist, Claire, the building principal, about those specific concerns. Our students who are urgent intervention in our Title I buildings are part of our Title I programming. Those parents get an additional letter that's a parent-school compact that talks about the fact that we'll have meetings with them, we'll do teacher training, etc. So that becomes a lot more intensive as part of the Title I mechanism. So we engage parents initially with, here's the supports that you're giving to your child, and then ways that you can support your child at home. And then at the time of conferences, a child who's getting an urgent intervention, it may be appropriate for the reading specialist to attend that conference. It may be appropriate for the intervention specialist to attend that conference so that the parents can get a more depth look at what's happening for their child.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? All right, thank you, Dr. Miner. Now I think you're up for the next presentation on the
Thank
Wingspan
you.
program.
Yes. So, Mr. Martin, if you could go to the next proposal. So, in trying to keep in line with the Eagles, I decided to title this Wingspan Proposal. These are proposals that I think stretch the district beyond where we're mandated to go with things like the comprehensive plan or the standards or the PSSA to places that I think we really should consider going, because they offer broad opportunities for our students and our community as a whole. So I'm going to walk through each of them with you this evening, and in each one it talks about what the funding would be and the rationale. There's a lot of text on the slide, so I apologize for that. We can certainly view it later. The first one is offering activity buses and or vans in an enhanced kind of mechanism. Often schools have a single activity bus that runs 1 or 2 days a week. It comes late. It's pretty much available at the junior and senior high school. It takes a long time to get home. Right now, we don't even offer that. So if you're a student who you want to participate in sports, you want to participate in after-school tutoring, you want to participate in the club, if you can walk home, you're golden. And if you have a parent that happens to be available to pick you up, you're golden, or if you're fortunate enough to have your own car. But if you're none of those things, you really are excluded from the ability to participate in our extracurricular activities and our sports. So it really to offer that to students at all levels, K to 12, club participation, tutoring participation, sports, in those grade levels, we think that providing transportation is important. We'd also like to expand those extracurricular offerings. We heard a debate presentation, offer more after-school tutoring and support, etc. How much will it cost? It's really going to be a function of how many students choose to participate and the cost of paying drivers. Obviously, we have the buses and the vans, and I'm sure you're very conscious of the shortage of bus drivers, in our school district and across the nation. Because these runs would be happening after the school day, they wouldn't further impact that. We'd like to begin it as soon as we can, start offering it for the activities that we already have, and as we build out additional activities along with tutoring, we would expand that. The reason that I included vans, one of the reasons that a lot of children don't partake of that is because of how long you have to wait if there's only one bus. The bus run can take 2 hours, 3 hours. Looking to use buses where there's higher density of students who need transportation, and vans perhaps out to places where there's lower density to speed that up, and then also not to have something that uses as much gas as a bus, etc., out on the roads. The proposal is that we pilot it in 21-22. We use ESSER funds to pay the cost of the drivers. There's actually subcategories within ESSER funds that are specifically allocated by the state to after-school programs, so we would use those funds in particular. We'd use this as a pilot year, and then based on the viability of it, the expense, how many students were participating, we would then, seek in future years to include that as part of our regular budgeting process. Director of Transportation, the business manager, principals, our various directors, athletics, teaching and learning, and I would all coordinate in terms of what is the need, where is the need, how do we assess the need, etc. So this is really, that is already designated in those ESSER funds as an after-school program. But again, saying to the board, we would like to move forward with having these activity buses and vans. So if this is something that the board, in fact, supports us moving forward with, we would move that, as a voting item next week to, say that the administration could pursue having an activity bus or activity vans after school this year using ESSER funds to cover the costs of the drivers. Any question about that particular proposal before I move on to the other ones?
Dr. Meyer, is that a K to 12 or is that mainly secondary?
It ultimately will be K to 12. Initially, secondary is where we already have sports and clubs established, but you'll see later that I think that we have a need for more extracurricular offerings at the elementary grades, homework help, that sort of thing. So as we build out those programs, we would extend that into the earlier grades as well, which is why I'm calling it enhanced. Traditionally, you don't offer after-school buses in elementary grades.
I fully support this, and I appreciate that you heard us when we said that this was important. I personally believe that if we can get a kid involved in something in the school other than academics, whether it's a sport or a club or band, that child, if they feel connected to people and they feel important in some aspect, that they're more likely to stay in school and then feel connected in school. So I think that they go hand in hand and they can't be considered two separate things. It's all part of our culture and being connected to one another.
I completely agree. Thank you. All right, the next, what slide, please? So the next one is, again, another proposal looking for the board to, sign on, basically, at the next meeting. So this is, for lack of a better name right now, something I entitled the Eagle's Nest Cafe. It can be called whatever the students ultimately choose. But basically, the idea is to have a Barnes & Noble-style coffee bar in the senior high school library. This would allow our special needs students who need job training to right there at the school without having to get on a bus and go to other locations, run this coffee shop in terms of, making the coffee, selling it, running the budget for it, all of those sorts of things. It's also nice for our students who partake of it. A lot of our students, while they were home learning virtually, appreciated having a latte, that sort of thing. When kids go off to college, that's a big deal. We don't have an open campus. Our students don't get to go off and do this. This is something that is not original. Many schools have this type of opportunity. It's easy to set up and establish. I've budgeted, $5,000 as a startup cost for the various equipment and supplies. In terms of actually funding it, ECF has asked that we come to them with a variety of price point opportunities for members of our community to sponsor through the foundation. So I'm hopeful that ECF would be able to provide sponsorship in the grant money to do this so that it wouldn't have to come out of the district budget. And then ultimately it would be self-funding as students made purchases, then that would turn back over to supplies, etc. I think this is a quick turnaround. We could open this in the spring of this year or the fall of next year. And again, looking for a board vote, just support of proceeding with the concept. Again, initially the intention is to get grant funding. However, if there were funds that we needed beyond what ECF is willing or able to provide, we would come separately to the board and ask for an approval for those costs. Questions about that proposal?
2 for 2 so far for me.
Good. Thank you. All right, next one. One of the things that I think we are really lacking is academic extracurricular opportunities. I was thrilled to see the debate. We certainly have a lot more of them at the secondary level than we do at the elementary level. One of the things that we altered this year is not having the Create special at Rifton. And so really we're looking at maker spaces in the library and other ways to encourage our students to pursue all kinds of academic endeavors, from reading Olympics to math. And then this particular one that I'm proposing right now is First Lego League. This is something that involves local, state, and national competitions. Students from pre-K right up through high school can build, they're basically building robots with the Lego kits. This organization, the First Lego League, they provide all of the materials. They say what the competition is that year. We have to pay for the materials. I shouldn't say they provide them, but you have to register for the competition. We would need co-curricular advisors to support this. This is one where I actually, as I was researching it, I'd like to share this video with you. It's maybe 6 minutes long, but it's corporations talking about this program. And I think as we think about our students moving into the job market and future careers, even from early ages, I think that you might find this an interesting presentation. So Mr. Martin, if you would go ahead and play that, please.
Transportation to me on many different levels represents freedom. We have developed so many different technologies to allow transportation to get better and better and better. But there's a long way to go.
At Amazon, we handle millions of packages that require a complex choreography of every type of machinery and transportation you can imagine, and some you may not have thought about before. While we have thousands of robots working with people daily, it's the people behind the technology who are constantly transforming the delivery experience for our customers and the communities we're a part of. Our transportation infrastructure supports more than the products you buy online. We leverage our systems to transport millions of units of essential items to disaster relief zones, PPE and medical supplies to first responders, meals from farms and food banks to families, devices and school supplies to students, and so many more every single day. These are the most important deliveries we make. If you could innovate to change someone's life, what would you deliver?
With folds and flourishes, bold colors and characters, our team uses tools and technology to transport us to innovative universes. Through film, we unleash the unlimited, adapting and expanding what we see in the real world, but unbound by the limitations of what is real today. Some call us futurists. At Lucasfilm, we do often feel like we're designing maps for future worlds, redefining infrastructure, reimagining transportation, and bridging cultures. If your dreams could appear before you, what would they look like?
At Boeing, we're innovating today for a better tomorrow. Boeing teams across the globe continue to transform how we design and build our products. From commercial aircraft to cargo air vehicles, our systems enable us to work more efficiently and improve the environmental performance of our products and operations. To meet the demands of our ever-changing world, Boeing drives innovation in technology that will transform transportation and mobility as we know it. We're investing and partnering across industry to develop safe and sustainable autonomous aircraft and supporting technologies that will radically shift the status quo and will surely offer newfound freedoms bound only by your imagination. What innovations would you like to see take flight?
Wireless technology, powered by our ideas, has been a hallmark of enabling people around the globe to stay connected no matter where they travel. And you should never underestimate the power of your network. Underdeveloped locations suddenly became connected, and smartphone solutions led to transformative breakthroughs, helping resolve systemic issues and empowering innovative pathways out of health crises and poverty. With 5G, AI, supercomputing, and intelligent sensing, another revolution is at our fingertips. The technology you're using today is evidence of our innovation mindset that continues to show up in unlikely places and led to our collaboration with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratories. They said, let's dare mighty things. Let's fly a helicopter on Mars. And today, years later, that helicopter is in the air. Autonomous vehicles, communication across millions of miles, and pioneering space exploration all require thinking that is out of the box and sometimes even off this planet. Are you ready to explore the unknown?
They say the view from the stratosphere changes everything you think about this little blue planet, its environment and ecology. Some might even say it's a small world after all. And when your goals are galactic and your horizons shift, then maybe there'll come a time when you trade engineering for Walt Disney Imagineering. And you'll discover that a walk in our parks can take you all the way to the stars. To us, at Walt Disney Imagineering, transportation means creating new ways to immerse yourself in new worlds. How would you go? Where would you go? And where would you land?
And no matter where you drive, ride, fly, or glide, we've grown to understand the best things about us is our collaborative community, ourselves and each other. The strength of all of us depends on the strength of each one of us. At FedEx, we're trusted to carry lots of different shapes to tons of amazing places. More than 220 countries and territories, in fact. There's nothing more important we could have been doing recently than delivering temperature-sensitive vaccines to millions of people. They say if you want to go fast, go alone. But when you want to go far, go together. We have big dreams of helping you go very, very far. And when we were transporting vital PPE to frontline workers, guess who was right there with us?
Transportation is an absolutely critical piece of all of our lives, and we've got to make it better. We've got to make it safer. We've got to make it more available to everybody, and we've got to expand the capability. We want to cross continents in minutes, not hours. I built the iBot to give back independence and freedom to disabled community. I made segways so that people could cruise around without the burden of something as big as a car. I built helicopters because the ability to just lift yourself up and apparently defy gravity, it is so liberating to me. And I think today's kids that embrace technology will continue to raise the bar and make better forms of transportation. They'll make forms that are more environmentally friendly. They'll make ones that are more energy efficient, more cost effective, faster, and capable of dealing with whole new environments that we can only dream about. Through teams, mentorship, internships, and scholarships.
First is more than a game.
We've seen you rise before.
We've witnessed your resilience firsthand.
Let this be a year of firsts. Let this be your year, a year in which you plant your feet and find your wings.
It's time to be transported. It's time to go full speed ahead.
We need you. The countdown is now.
Together, we're driving first, forward.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. So again, I wanted to show that video because it's not just about kids playing with Legos, etc. It's really about thinking about their future careers, and they do a really nice job. If you could stop that, Mr. Martin. Thank you. Of incorporating exactly what the broader purpose is with corporations. It's Mr. Martin, are you able to make that music stop playing? There we go. Thank you. And so it is really exciting, and it is a national, obviously, endeavor for our kids. So the costs associated with running this include an advisor. We talked earlier about that process, the materials. And again, this is something that we would take out to ECF, offer to them first as a grant opportunity to find funding for it. We're hopeful that they would be able to do that. There are many people who are interested specifically in science technology donations through EITC grants and other grants that they give to the foundation. And then again, just ultimately to have a board vote supporting proceeding with the concept and hiring, co-curricular staff to support this. We would like to do it in each of the 3 K4 buildings as well as in Rifton, ultimately, as students do this, if there's a high level of interest, you can continue it through the junior high, through the high school, and as I mentioned, students can earn college scholarships. They get recruited from corporations for their involvement in an activity like this. So, questions, comments about moving forward with this?
As a guy that goes to Brickfest every year, this is not a problem for me. You're 3 for 3.
Anyone else? All right, then I think one more, Mr. Martin. This is the biggest one by far. One of the things that I, as an administrator, have always wanted to be a part of is creating a fully inclusive playground. Fully inclusive playgrounds are playgrounds where parents in wheelchairs, students students with autism, students who are blind or deaf, parents who have all kinds of challenges that prevent them from accessing a playground, which is one of the joys of childhood, going to a playground, swinging on a swing, being pushed by your parent, doing that with your siblings. They are extremely few and far between. In fact, if you have a disabled child in our area and you would like to partake of a playground like this, I believe the closest one is on the other side of Westchester. So you're packing up your child, driving all the way out there for a day in the park that everybody else can go around the corner for. These playgrounds are not just accessible to students and parents with disabilities, but to all children. And they are really quite remarkable. I don't feel like I could do it justice. So there's a shorter video that Mr. Martin, if you could show, I think really does a much better job of explaining what these are than I could possibly do.
Things that you love about parks to get to in Colorado or outside Colorado, or things that you hate that just don't work. The equipment that just has good intentions, but it doesn't, in person actually evolve to that.
The theme of the park is just music because of the amphitheater, and obviously the centerpiece is the trombone. We were here for the opening 2 weeks ago, and my son, usually when we go to parks, that's the whole reason why this is the park. I wanted a park that he could play at. Literally, I could let him go and play. The play structures are very suited to not only him, but just everyone.
For me to be able to just let her interact with the equipment, the sensory stuff, for her, she loves a thrill. She's a thrill seeker, so, for her to have a swing that we can both swing at together, she loves that we go around. The thing goes really fast, which is so cool. There's just the music and just being able to go on the different levels of the equipment. Those are little things that make such a big difference.
This playground is a huge success. I think the coolest part of inclusive play is that you are adults, right? It's got to be such an outcome. It's such a cool place to be for everybody. And I think that's what this playground is all about. That it doesn't scream, this is for our special needs here, or normal here. This is just a really cool place to be. This playground has been really great. Annabelle last year had a really hard time at school. She didn't have accessible playground. And she came home for about 2 weeks in a row crying every day. She didn't have any playground. So we've been watching her school and conversations with her that there's a difference between kids not wanting to play with her and her not taking it to play. And so now she's got places to go. She doesn't have steps and she can be at equipment. Every other kid, which is exactly what we're trying to do.
Things like this didn't exist.
Nice. Now that she can actually play with me, and I don't have to
So, like I said, I think that video does a much better job of giving you an idea of what it is that we're talking about in this proposal. This is by far the biggest reach proposal. My best guess estimate is this is about $250,000 project, and I believe that this could be relatively easily fully funded through private means, through other specific grants for these playgrounds. There are, I think, a lot of people right now who are looking to make significant donations, who are looking for a place for families to gather in the Exeter community. That's certainly something that has been resounding, that there aren't things to do with your kids, that there aren't places to go. And to have something like this, it's not only for typical families to enjoy, but for all families to truly enjoy, I think would really be a service to our community. In terms of what I would be asking for the board to do is to just approve the concept that we can move forward with exploring it. Ultimately, we have 90 acres at Awatin Creek. I believe we have all of the land here at Lausch all the way over to the high school. We have land across from Rifton. We have a number of places that this could be sited. I think to place it at one of the places where we have schools, especially where we have a student population that has disabilities, so that students could use this during recess, as well as families, evenings, weekends, throughout the summer. So that would be, a concrete contribution on the part of the district would be the land to site it. The proposal is that it's all privately funded from the excavation to the equipment purchases, etc., as well as a privately funded fund for any major maintenance, replacement of equipment, etc. The other contribution of the district would be just day-to-day grounds for keeping the lawn mowed, etc., like we do at any of our facilities. So this is one where, again, the primary contributions are the land and the day-to-day maintenance, but we would seek to have it all funded through partnerships, working in conjunction with the Ed Foundation, ECEF, with potentially the Township. Again, there's a lot of nonprofits that are specifically interested in developing this sort of thing, as well as private donations. You can go to the next slide. This is actually a two-part slide. I would take a leadership role along with Mr. Fike, Mr. Legath, Dawn Harris, in terms of the district's role. Obviously, we continue to communicate with the board about plans, the fundraising efforts, the equipment, etc. It mentions the key potential partners there, and this is something that realistically could be accomplished by the summer of 2023, depending on the siting of it, any permits that were necessary, etc. This is all. There are companies that make all of this playground equipment. It's like ordering other playground equipment, so that aspect of it isn't challenging. So again, I'd be looking for the board to at least offer a vote of support of this in theory, of siting it on our property, of moving forward with a public-private partnership to try to get something like this off the ground. Thoughts, comments, questions?
You are speaking to my heart. I love this. And just want to say that, in 2 months when I'm no longer a board member, if there is anything I can do as a parent and a community member, I am all in. These kids deserve this, and it makes me very happy that you notice and recognize that. I do have one question. In 2 of the 4 proposals or thoughts that you have, which again, all of them, I love. You definitely surprised me tonight. I was not expecting this. It's above and beyond, so I appreciate that. But I was curious. In 2 of the 4, you had mentioned, collaboration possibly with ECF. I was curious if that was mentioned to them, or if that's just something that you're hoping for.
Yeah, actually, so the after-school transportation, the activity bus, that's something that really since before I came, people talked about a need here in the district, and of course then the funding specifically targeting that through the grants. But in conversations with Ange Cook and Amy Lutz, one of the things that they have said is that, and I appreciate this, I had at one point in my career been a director of a school district foundation. My husband works in nonprofit, so is that when you're raising funds for an idea, it's much easier than when you're just giving me money for whatever. And so they've said specifically, can you come forward with price point programs that we can ask donors, EITC partners, et cetera, to sponsor and be a part of. So after having that conversation with Amy and Ange about, what are those price point things that we, that the foundation could go out and solicit contributions for, As I put them together, I realized that I shouldn't give them to ECF before making sure that the board, in fact, would want to do them should ECF successfully raise the funds for doing it. So yes, I've already had a conversation with them specifically that they wanted projects to target. Whether or not they will, in fact, be able to contribute to them, that remains to be seen. But for instance, in the case of the playground, if ECF was a partner and could funnel EITC, that would be a terrific way to get a chunk of the funds. If not, however, I think that there's unlimited other potential private funding sources from individuals who are able to just write a check for $250,000 to grants and collaborative endeavors. So I will be presenting these things, assuming that the board doesn't say, please don't, to ECF at their meeting tomorrow to say, here are the price point ideas that I have for you to potentially raise funds against.
Dr. Meyer, this is, it's a pretty, as you mentioned, pretty ambitious project and very expensive project. And one of the things with our outdoor facilities is that, there's no, there are no gates or fences or anything like that around it that would prohibit anybody from the county from actually accessing it. And I guess my question is this a big enough project? You mentioned this would be the only one in the region. Is this big enough and important enough that you may want to kind of think beyond Exeter and kind of say, you know what, the entire county this would be a draw, for so many folks, who are disabled or kids with or parents with kids who have disabilities to come and to find a place. Why not reach out to the greater, advocates of disabled children in the county or even other school districts and ask for their support as well.
Absolutely, Dr. Hamburger. In fact, why I feel certain that raising $250,000 will not be a challenge is that not only throughout the county, but again, in terms of the locations for these things, Chester County, Montgomery County, Lancaster County, really, these don't exist, and disabled children exist everywhere. And also, parents who are in wheelchairs who can't get onto playgrounds with their kids, that sort of thing. So I think, county level funding, state level funding, private grants and foundations from a broad swath, and part of the reason I've said $250,000 is the pricing is actually based on the number of people that you anticipate will use it. So the more people, the bigger the equipment, the more equipment, et cetera. And just ballpark pricing it out, I anticipated that it would really pull people from a wide geographic area far beyond Exeter. But I think it would be, a source of pride and something that the Exeter community is really longing for in terms of a place for families together and, parents to interact with their children. But I certainly think that, surrounding school districts, and far beyond that, there would be an interest in supporting this and being a part of it. And I think, again, that, beyond just the playground itself, that ability to partner and to, as a school district, not be insular in terms of this is what we do, but, we have, like we've done with the food pantry and other things, we have these facilities, we have this land, they're community resources. How can we really, and that's why I called them wingspan things. They're obviously not what we have to do. They're stretching beyond that to what could we do. So yes, I would agree. It would have a much broader reach than that.
Thank you, Dr. Miner. A very exciting project. It also reinforces our district-wide commitment to equity. In fact, redefines equity in a very visual way. Just one final item on the agenda, which I would suggest that we move ahead to the voting meeting, and that is requests by I think 2 students for early graduation. So, Mrs. Wilson, I'd like to see that on the voting. And that concludes the Education Committee report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fiddler. And I just would like to remind everybody, under number 1C, the meeting minutes were posted for the special board voting meeting, the committee of the whole meeting, and the board voting meeting from September. Did anybody have any comments or anything on the minutes? Okay, then we will move those forward as well. Okay. We had our debate club presentation. The extracurricular salary positions, Dr. Herring.
We'll be recommending to the board approve the changes and additions to the extracurricular salary positions that are posted in an attached memo. And that's it.
Okay, no comments. All right, then we will move on to Mr. Ahrens with the Finance, Facilities, and Audit Committee.
First item on the agenda is the budget timeline for this upcoming fiscal year. Brian, do you want to elaborate on this timeline?
Yes, I did send the Hasbro version of all the deadlines you have to meet, or we have to meet. One thing I wanted to note, they just published the base index for 22-23 year. It is 3.4%. They have not yet published the adjusted index. My plan is this month and next month to be meeting with department heads, starting the budget process, getting their wants, wishes, looking at the history, and I'd like to have a preliminary budget done in December. I don't want to schedule meetings right now because I know we'll have reorganization in December and there'll be a new finance chair because you're leaving. So, but I did want to give everyone the timeline and the state requirements for when we have to meet deadlines. We'll have to make a decision by the end of January if we're going to stay under the index. Once we get the new finance committee, I probably will recommend that we just stay under the index. It doesn't look like we'll need an exception from what I can see, but let me put the budget together. But we'll teach the new members the process. So, okay.
We'll also be voting on per capita tax exonerations, which are detailed in the agenda, and also the audit of the tax collector for the Borough of St. Lawrence. And I did have a question about this, Brian. I noticed that the preparer for the audit is Barbican Thornton and Company. It's my memory, and I could certainly be wrong about it, that was not the same company that did it last year. Do you know if that's the case or not?
Yeah, the Barbican Thornton, I think, did do St. Lawrence, Exeter Township, and Exeter School District uses Malley Falcon. Malley, it used to be Malley Falcon area, Malley Company.
Do we still split the cost for the audit with the borough?
No, because they're only auditing the taxes they collected for us, not they get a separate audit for the borough taxes, and that's paid for by the Borough of St. Lawrence.
So then why are we using a separate firm for the audit of the tax collector?
It's been past practice.
Okay. Yeah.
That's something we can discuss in finance if you want to look in the future. Or
do you think that there's a cost savings associated with using a singular firm?
Sometimes, but the tax collector is so small.
Okay.
You know, it's not a comprehensive audit like the single audit we have to do in the district. It's just making sure that everything they deposited was turned over to us.
All right. I'll have a follow-up question, but I'll send it in an email. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Policy Committee, Dr. Hamburger.
Thanks, Mrs. Wilson. We have just one policy that's, we've actually gotten to the point where we're not really introducing too many new revisions to the policy manual because we've really, I think, worked really hard over the past several years to try to get the policy manual up to date. But there's a policy that will be up for second reading. We've already gone through first reading, voting on it, and it has to do with public comment. And we did make or public participation in board meetings. We did make one modification to this, very, very minor modification. It was a clarification, just to kind of indicate that the 30-minute limit to public comment pertains to both the comments that are made at the beginning of the meeting and prior to the meeting adjournment. So just wanted to make that clarification. So that's This is I guess we said before, just a minor policy revision and some clarification that we've had some prior conversations about.
Okay.
I just have a couple of questions, Ms. Wilson. So I like public comment period, and I like the community to know that we always have the option to engage them. This is a public forum that is recorded. It is audio taped. It is or audio recorded, videotaped, and memorialized in minutes for all to see. I think it's important that we have the opportunity to dialogue. I appreciate the fact that we added a portion to the end of the agenda, I think based on a suggestion that was made at a prior public meeting. And I think that there should always be an opportunity for the community to have the chance to talk with the board. We have extended the 30-minute limit as appropriate. Personally, I don't have a problem with 4 minutes. I don't have a problem with 10 minutes if somebody has, something to say and is willing to engage, in a conversation. I'm okay with being challenged as long as those who are speaking are also okay with being challenged. I generally support anything that will allow us to have conversation and dialogue. I will support this policy. But I will also, I think we reserve the right to extend public comment when we feel as if it's appropriate.
I think I support this as well. The only thing I'll probably say is that we have to make sure that the subject matter is to what's being voted on beforehand. I think there's going to be like some areas where there might be a situation where someone starts talking about a subject that we're not going to be voting on. And I wonder how we're going to kind of discern, say, stop right there. Hey, this is for what's for, let's do this at the end of the thing. Are we going to stop them in mid-sentence or, I wonder is there some kind of way of, maybe regulating that?
Yeah, I think in the beginning it's just going to be a learning curve for everybody to remind everyone, if you have comments about the agenda, this is now. And, if you would like to speak about whatever topic you would like to address, that will be after. So we would have to remind people.
Perhaps we could also list that on the sign-up sheet, that they know which one they're signing up for, and then maybe that will, remind them obviously before they speak, but then there's kind of 2 reminders of that in addition to this meeting and when we vote next time being a reminder.
Thanks, Mrs. Wilton. That's all we had for public for policy.
All right. Mr. Kaufman, would you like to make your public comment now?
Hello. Is this on? Okay. My name is Bill Kaufman. My name is Bill Kaufman. I live at 32 Longview Drive. I find it interesting that in the 56-page curriculum plan, there wasn't a single mention of the fact that we are 4% below state average in participation rate of students taking AP courses. I actually find it shocking since we changed the weighting of the courses this year. I sent each of the board members, and Anthony, I gave you a copy of it today, that show that Sammy Sr. can score a 91 in an AP course. Johnny Jr., he can score a 94. When the transcripts come out, Sammy Sr. scored higher because they both got a 2 in the AP course. For the past year, I have heard nothing but equity and equality coming from every one of you. If someone could explain to me how a person getting a lower score gets a higher score on their transcript is both equitable and equal, I'd love to hear it. The other thing is the kids that signed up for AP courses this year, they did it in January of last year. That's when they put in their tentative schedules. This change, I don't know how it can be enforced when the rules were different when they signed up for the courses. I also don't understand why we're making the change, because from the plan, obviously there's nothing that we're doing wrong or have a concern about with the AP courses, or it would have been mentioned as something that we need to address. The last thing I'll say is the kids that are taking these courses, none of them ever expect to do bad. Some of these kids missed many, many days of school this past year. Not because they were taking trips or because they were sick. It was all because of where they actually sat in various classes. There's one kid that I know missed over 20 days due to quarantines. Think about that. We do block courses. That means you have 180 days divided in half. That's 90 days. If you missed 20 days, what percent of the class did you miss? So, you know, I don't know what to say on it. I would like to ask a question that I wish would be followed up on, which is, why are we making this change? And why are we doing it in the middle of a pandemic when there's a lot of circumstances that the kids don't have control of? Thank you.
Mrs. Wilson, the change that Mr. Kaufman is referring to is actually made at the time the Soaring Eagle document was updated last January prior to students registering for the course. So I'd like to offer that clarification. And in terms of the import of AP exams, Mr. Fidler, as chair of the Education Committee, has brought up consistently and rightfully so our AP participation levels. And in my opening day presentation to senior high school staff, I shared that only 17% of the students at Exeter High School take an AP exam, and only 13% of them pass, which is a big part of the reason that Exeter has a very low ranking in the U.S. News World Report in terms of whether or not it's a rigorous and challenging high school. And so having students increase their participation in AP is one of our secondary goals. Certainly our main focus is those 3 100 goals, because it represents Exeter poorly, which ultimately affects property values, which affects potentially students' admission to elite colleges because it's seen as a non-challenging high school. And so in terms of why students do or do not take the AP exam, it's something that I'm going to ask Mr. Campbell to come up and speak about, because it's a problem that we have been thinking about. It will be part of our planning for the high school for next year. And ultimately, the AP itself, the AP courses are designed as a course to take a test so that you can get college credit. It means kind of the ultimate example of teaching to a test. That is why AP classes exist. And if you're not going to take the test, I'm not sure it's worth the district's investment to send teachers to training and have specialized materials for a course that is really about taking the test so that you get a 3, 4, or 5 and hopefully get college credit for it. So even the exploration of whether or not we should continue to offer AP versus international baccalaureate, et cetera, are all conversations that we're having. But if Mr. Campbell can come up and just talk a little bit about the different approaches that we're trying to take with AP participation and the specific scenario that Mr. Kaufman is addressing in terms of equity in the course weight. Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Yes, thank you. And I do share Mr. Kaufman's desire to have AP participation at a greater rate. As Dr. Miner mentioned, we definitely are trying to pursue ways to increase the number of students that are in honors and AP classes. Our students deserve to have a school where they have that access and are successful in participating in a rigorous and challenging curriculum. So in terms of the AP and honors course weighting, everyone in the honors, dual enrollment, and AP courses all get honors weight that is appropriate for honors level courses. What sets AP weight apart from honors and dual enrollment really is that going above and beyond the taught curriculum of preparing for and being successful in that test. So students who do commit themselves to that do generally do pretty well, and we are incentivizing those who earn that 3, 4, and 5 to have that additional weight to go beyond the course that they have and take the test and succeed in that. So everyone gets the honors weight. The additional weight really is for those students that are pursuing the test and performing on that. So we do need to get more students into that. I think Mr. Kaufman's right, and Dr. Flan, Dr. Wright, and I are taking a look at strategies that are being used in a number of successful and high-performing schools to take a look at how they have approached their AP and honors programs and trying to see how those might fit in order for us to get more kids into those. We know our kids can be successful in it. So to go back to what Dr. Miner was talking about earlier, we need to take a look at the systems that are in place so that our kids can get into those and find success in those programs.
Mr. Campbell, can you just speak? I think Mr. Kaufman in his example about seniors and juniors is referencing an inequity in terms of how those weights are calculated. Can you explain that decision?
Yeah, thank you. So really the difference between seniors is unique to the logistical circumstances of seniors. So seniors are awarded the 1.10 for testing. And that is largely because we do not have, or it's entirely because we do not have the test scores by the end of the year. And in many respects, those scores and the difference of those is not really relevant for students who have already been accepted to colleges. The decisions that were made by colleges were based largely on the strength of their transcript and the anticipation that they're going to test. So that's less relevant for seniors. We do think it's important for juniors, and it is a practice that's looked at in other schools where they do change the weight of those based on students and their test scores. So the difference between juniors and seniors is really something that would be consistent for all seniors in their cohorts, not really comparing juniors and seniors. Juniors and seniors aren't competing for college applications with each other. Juniors this year will be seniors next year, and they will be then undergoing that same college process that the current year seniors are.
Mr. Campbell, how important is the weighted GPA at this point for colleges when they're looking at students?
Well, we no longer have the valedictorian, and we aren't publishing class rank, but the weighted GPA is something that is going to be considered by schools. Schools are pretty adept at looking at GPA and weighted GPA and also examining the strength of the curriculum that the students are taking. So I think colleges are pretty skilled at taking a look at all of those data points and understanding how they're going to vary from school to school. I mean, not every school is going to be offering the same weight for their weighted courses, so colleges need to be able to tease that out. I've seen ranges everywhere from just like a 1.02 to everything like a 1.2. So there's a really wide range of what those weights could be, and colleges know how to compare apples to apples when looking at Exeter to a variety of other high schools. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then we are going to be moving on to the voting agenda for the October 19th meeting, I think it is. We will be moving forward the minutes. We will be moving forward the Wingspan proposals from Dr. Miner, the Activity Bus and Van, the Eagle's Nest Cafe, the first Lego League K-6, and the Eagle's Nest Playground for All as conceptual ideas, and we will have future conversations about funding. We're moving forward the early graduation requests and the extracurricular salary positions. We will be moving forward the per capita tax exonerations and the audit of the tax collector of the St. Lawrence Borough. And then we will be moving forward with policy number 903. Did I get everything? Okay. Is there any board member who would like to be heard at this time?
Could I just ask for an update on where we are with coffees and conversation, please?
Sure, absolutely. We had scheduled 4 coffee and conversations for our community. We held 2 of them. 4 members of the community joined us at each coffee. I believe originally we had 42 that signed up, but only 8 came. We did cancel one due to nobody RSVPing that they were coming. And then we actually had Dr. Herring, myself, and Dr. Hamburger. We came, but nobody else joined us. So we did speak with 8 community members, and we had great conversations with them. And but I'm not really sure it was an effective means or use of our time.
Are we considering, beyond board? I mean, I think I want to get past the fallacy that the only time we hear from the public is at these meetings, because we get lots of emails. We see, there's a lot of chatter on social media. I think there's other attempts to try and engage. Are we thinking of other methods to try to sort of interact?
I would love to hear ideas. I mean, I think when I want to say it was an effective use of our time was the day that we were sitting there when nobody else came. But the conversations that we did have with our community members were great. So I would love to find out how to have more of those conversations and engage our community. I know in the past we've tried the town hall method. That seemed to kind of fizzle. It started out stronger, then fizzled. But I would be happy to hear of ideas.
I personally would love to hear ideas from the people that stand up here and tell us that we don't communicate with them. How would they like us to? Obviously, we can have a little bit of a conversation here, but that's not what our main agenda is, or we're here to do the items that are listed. So we can have a little bit of a conversation, but to have a real constructive conversation, I'd like to hear what their ideas are, because I think that's important. I mean, if they're the ones that are going to come, they have to tell us what works best for them. So maybe we can kind of leave it open for a few weeks and hope that they email us, or maybe they come to a meeting and stand up at public comment and give us their suggestions.
In my opinion, I think we should be having town halls. In my opinion, I think we should be having them twice a year, exactly at the same time every year, so it's consistent. I think we stopped doing them, and my fear is that people just feel, okay, it's just not happening, why bother? But if you do it consistently every year, then people know it's there. It becomes a habit. Maybe if we start doing it, there'll be 2 people in the crowd, but once word gets out, there will be more people. And I think if we're telling people that once they come and they speak to us, we will speak back with them at that moment, I think it would be a better option than just saying sign up for coffee and combo.
Yeah, and I agree that I believe in the past our town halls became more of presentations, and I don't think that our community wants more presentations. I think they want to have discussions. So I think we need to look at the ways to make that happen and not make it into, an hour presentation on something that they really don't want to sit for. They just want the 30 minutes at the end where we have a discussion. So maybe like Dr. Hamburger or Mr. Japino, you've been on long enough. I mean, I believe we did have town halls twice a year. Like that was pretty consistent, right?
Yeah. Bob Quinter loved town halls because he wanted to beat the crap out of half the people who stood up. But it actually elicited comment and, engaged people and infuriated people. And I think that, sometimes, you don't want it to get violent, but you do want to be, give people the opportunity to express themselves. Again, I always caution people though that you are, on a publicly recorded meeting, you're, accessible to anybody, so that you hope that there's some level of decorum, but at the same time, I'm okay with a free for all for words. I'm not okay necessarily with a free for all with with fists. And you know, I think if we, to Dr. Hearing's point, if you know, if we want to have a session and establish it and, you know, codify it as these are the times of the year that it's going to happen and that it's an open mic, so to speak, you know, I think it's fair to see what happens since nothing else, you know, appears to be working. You know, social media is an easy way to share information. It's not always fair, but, you know, it's an environment that we all sort of interact with, deal with. And you know, I never look at social media as necessarily a sort of a factual or fair representation of anything. And why would it be? Because social media is really people's opinions, and I would never discount that opinion, but you have to take it for what it's worth. And I think that when we look at folks on social media who are interacting, you know, the first thing you want to do is take a deep breath and realize that, you know, this is somebody who's in their own space reacting based on what they know or what they understand. And it's their, you know, right and opportunity to do that. I'd love to give people a forum here to stand up and have that same dialogue with us. I mean, you know, we're all part of this community. I live here. I did talk to Ted at swim matches. Have you ever gone to a swim meet that goes on for 8 hours? I mean, I was going to sit there and look in Ted's eyes for 8 hours. Of course I'm going to ask questions. That's what you do at a swim meet. Yes, and I, you know, asked him lots of questions about school stuff. I mean, you kind of run out of things to talk about after 8 hours. But we are a community, and I don't hate Ted Gardella. I don't hate Jerry Gelliff. I don't hate anybody in this room. I disagree with them, and I disagree with them vehemently at times about certain things. But I give Ted credit because Ted's thrown his hat in the ring. I give Jerry credit because Jerry's, you know, got a dialogue going in the community. I don't like Jerry's dialogue all the time, but, you know, the point is that, you know, we are all part of the Exeter community. It's okay for us to not agree. I like hearing Bill Kaufman talk. I mean, I don't always agree with Bill, but Bill actually has some good ideas, and he makes good presentations, and he has good points. Other people do too, and I think that the more that we can try to find a way to get past some of the stuff that goes on at a national level or whatever is happening there, and realize that I'm going to go toe-to-toe with somebody here in this meeting, and I'm going to be standing next to them at the Giant buying, you know, navel oranges the next day, okay? And so I never want to try and put myself or anybody else in a situation where it's uncomfortable. It's my community. I live here. And I think if we can try to find a way to do this and to have this discussion, and yeah, it's emotional. We get emotional. I get it, okay? But if Ted had a flat tire, I'd call Jerry up and ask Jerry to go help him. But I think I think we just have to remember that. And, you know, I got to remember it as much as everybody else. I mean, I'm a Slovak from the coal region. I can get as fired up as anybody about some of this stuff. But I understand what we're trying to do here. I've been on this board for 8 years. I'm going to be on this board for 2 years, and I'm going to be done. And I'm going to feel like that I have, you know, tried to do something in my community that helped the greater community. Some people will agree with that. Some people will disagree with that. I'm okay with that. I'm gonna wash my hands of it and say somebody else's turn, because we have 25,000 people who live in this community. There's lots of people who can have their turn.
I would like to say too that the people that came to the coffee and conversation, I believe all of them have students in this district or had students in this district, and it's clear our community cares about the kids and the programs we have, and that when they came, they had concerns about their kids. They were very specific experiences that they had issues with or concerns about. And I think that sitting there talking through what they were able to walk out the door and say, okay, I was heard. My concern about my child is heard. And I think that's what, you know, really is close to everyone's heart, is their kids. And it's a big district. There's lots of kids here. And we sitting at this table have to make decisions all the time for 4,000 students. And I think we also do need to hear the conversations that are about one student or two students. They're also important conversations that we have to have.
Mrs. Wilson, you said there were 8 of how many who actually showed up? 8 of 40 something?
8.
Right. Do you think it's worthwhile reaching out to those who didn't show up? A phone call, an email, just to find out why? Maybe something happened at home, an emergency, dinner was late because of this, parents had to work late. But it might be instructive for us in framing whatever we do in the future to understand why the vast majority of them didn't even show up and I guess didn't RSVP or RSVP'd and didn't show up. I don't know. Not to buttonhole them, but just to learn from the experience.
I think that could be a good follow-up question. And also might be a good follow-up question for the people who did come and say, how did you feel that your needs were met when
that's a good thought.
you came?
Yeah.
For those of you that are running for office in the future, I've been on the board for 2 years. One thing that you'll realize once you guys, hopefully, if you guys do win and get on the board, is that you really only have 11% of the vote. You need to have the other people to go along with whatever your ideals are. And so, let's just have an understanding that, you're going to be working together. It's a consensus. It's not something that you can bash or yell and scream at everyone on the board. You're going to have their participation and their, go ahead to go and even get something even voted on. As you can see, for example, today, that, we don't even vote on it until we say, yeah, we're going to do this. So just an understanding of that, understand that your power is very limited being on the board. So that's the only thing I really had to say about that, is just be careful if you're going to maybe bash them on social media, do all these things to be angry at them for whatever it is, because if you're planning on working with them, it's not going to work out very well if you're going to bash every single person on the board and do it that way. So I'm just saying that in general. I'm not pointing anyone specifically out, but I'm just saying this is something that is not a good advisor. We lost, we're going to have 4 off, but there's still 5 other people on there. So you're going to have to get somebody else besides the 4 of you, whoever is running or wins, to go over with your ideas. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I do believe that the board will meet in executive session for personnel issues following this meeting. So thank you very much.